Picture a building the size of a cathedral. Now fill it with silk gloves and whalebone corsets and 47 varieties of ribbon. Add the smell of floor wax and ladies' perfume and 300 humans sweating quietly under wool uniforms they are not permitted to remove. Add a pneumatic tube system hissing overhead like a mechanical snake, shooting brass cylinders of cash through pipes in the walls and ceiling, and somewhere behind a door marked private, a man in a grey suit watching everything through a periscope mirror that lets him see every floor without being seen himself. That's a department store in 1913. Half church, half prison, half theatre. Yes, I know that's 3 halves. That's the point. The place defied ordinary arithmetic. A place where you could spend your entire working life, 12 years, 15, 20, and still not know the name of the man who owned the building you spent more hours in than your own bed. A place where a woman could earn 40 cents a day carrying other people's money across marble floors, and the woman selling the gloves 3 feet away earned $2 a week, and neither one of them was allowed to sit down. We're going back there tonight, not as customers, not as shoppers looking at the pretty window displays with the wax mannequins and the tastefully arranged Christmas parcels. We're going in the back entrance, the one the staff use on the side street, the one with no sign on the door except a number. We're clocking in at 7 in the morning with a card we can't afford to drop, because dropping it means a fine, and a fine means a thinner envelope on Friday, and a thinner envelope means choosing between the boarding house and eating. We're going to live one day in there, one full day, everything you would have seen and smelled and heard and survived. So I make these history stories, and at this point I genuinely cannot tell if you're falling asleep or if you're lying there at 2 in the morning, deeply invested in the fate of a 17-year-old cash girl from rural Ohio, who's about to learn that the perfume counter operates by rules that would make a military general weep with admiration. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket up. Here we go. Your name is Eleanor Marsh. You go by Ellie, or you did, back in Millhaven, which is a town of 400 people outside Columbus, where the main industry is a grain elevator, and the second main industry is talking about the grain elevator. You're 17 years old. You arrived in the city 8 weeks ago with a cardboard suitcase, a letter of introduction from your mother's cousin, who used to work in the glove department before she married, and $32 sewn into the lining of your coat. The $32 is mostly gone now. You got the position at Haverford's department store on your 3rd try. The first 2 times the employment office on the 5th floor looked at your shoes, sensible country shoes, thick-soled, brown, practical in a way that apparently announced your origins the moment you crossed the threshold, and told you positions had been filled. They hadn't been filled. You could see 3 other girls being processed for positions through the frosted glass of the inner office. What the shoes announced was not just where you were from, but what you didn't know, and what you didn't know was the first of about 400 rules you were about to start learning. The 3rd time you wore your mother's cousin's shoes, which were a size too small and black and had a modest heel, and you got the position. You are a cash girl. This is the bottom. You understand that now, in a way you did not entirely understand it, when Mrs. Hooper in the employment office explained the position with the practiced neutrality of a person who has said the same words so many times they have hollowed themselves out. Cash girls carry the cash from the sales floor to the counting office and return the change. You're responsible for the carrier at all times. The loss of a carrier or its contents will be deducted from your wages. She paused, looking at you with eyes that had processed hundreds of girls from Millhaven and places like Millhaven. Do you understand? You said you understood. You didn't. Quite. But you said it with enough confidence that she moved on to the section about the uniform. The uniform is black. Long skirt, white collar, white cuffs, hair pinned back. You're not permitted to wear jewellery except a small brooch if it is tasteful. You're not permitted to wear perfume, because perfume is for the customers. You're not permitted to chew anything on the floor. You're not permitted to speak to a colleague while a customer is within earshot. You're not permitted to lean against the counter. You're not permitted to sit. Not ever. Not in front of the customers. This is the rule that will define your body over the next several years, though you don't know that yet. You don't know yet what 10 hours of standing on marble floors does to your feet, your ankles, these small bones along the arch that nobody names until they start aching. You don't know what it does to the tendons behind your knees, the low curve of your back. You don't know that by November, 3 months in, you will fall asleep at night with a specific kind of pain that starts at the ball of your left foot and travels upward in a thin line, like a wire drawn taut from sole to hip, and that you will learn to sleep through it, because the alternative is lying awake, and lying awake means thinking about everything else. But that's November. Right now it's October, the 3rd week, and you've been doing this for long enough to know the floor, but not long enough for the floor to know you back. Your eyes open before the bell. The bell rings at 5:50, which gives you 40 minutes to dress, wash, eat something from the small kitchen on the 6th floor where the live-in girls take their meals, and present yourself at the staff entrance with your card. The bell is mounted in the hallway outside the dormitory room you share with 4 other girls, and it is not a gentle bell. It is a mechanical alarm mounted in a tin casing that produces a sound somewhere between a train whistle and a man being surprised, and it has never once eased you gradually into consciousness. It grabs consciousness from wherever it's hiding and drags it forcibly into the room. You are awake. The room smells of other girls, 4 of you in a space designed for 2, and the specific layered smell of that arrangement, sleep and hairpins and the faint chemical ghost of the cheap soap you all use from the dispensary on the 4th floor, available to live-in employees at cost, meaning it costs something, which means you use less of it than you should. Under all of that, the smell of the store itself seeping up through the floorboards. Haverford's department store is open below you even when it's closed. The building breathes its own particular breath at all hours. Floor wax and camphor and the warm wool smell of fabric stored in airless rooms, and something underneath it all, something almost sweet and slightly rotten that you have not yet identified, but will eventually recognize as the smell of old money. Not metaphorically. The actual smell of paper currency handled by thousands of people and stored in wooden drawers and sent through brass tubes at pressure. You've been sleeping in Haverfords for 8 weeks. You've been breathing this smell for 8 weeks. You're already starting to carry it with you. Agnes is already up. Agnes is always already up. Agnes is 19 and has been at Haverfords for 2 years, which makes her, in the calculus of the 6th floor dormitory, something between a mentor and a sergeant. She's sitting on the edge of her bed in her underthings, pinning her hair with the speed and efficiency of someone who has done this 10,000 times, which she nearly has. She doesn't look up when you stir. "You got section C this morning," she says. Mrs. Aldridge is covering fabrics again. Don't make eye contact. Mrs. Aldridge is the head of the fabric department on the 2nd floor, and she has a particular view of cash girls that is difficult to describe, except to say that she looks at you the way a person might look at a piece of furniture that has moved slightly from where it was placed. You are meant to be there. You are meant to serve a function, but you're not meant to be noticed. And if you are noticed, something has gone wrong. Why not, you ask, pulling on your stockings. Agnes finally looks up. Her expression is the expression of someone who has learned a lesson the expensive way and is now in the complicated position of trying to explain the cost without reliving the payment. Just don't, she says. The kitchen on the 6th floor serves breakfast from 5:50 to 6:30. There is oatmeal and there is bread and there is tea. The oatmeal is the same temperature as regret, technically warm, ultimately unsatisfying. And the bread is from yesterday, but acceptable if you don't think about it. The tea is strong and real, and this is the best thing about breakfast. You drink 2 cups standing up, because even here, even in the staff kitchen with no customers for 6 floors in any direction, you are already starting not to sit. This is what institutions do to you. They colonize your habits before you notice they're doing it. 6 girls around the small table, or near it. A 7th eating standing at the counter. Someone's talking about a customer from yesterday who asked to see 43 pairs of gloves and then bought none of them, just walked away, which is something customers are entirely permitted to do and which is somehow more exhausting than if they'd been rude about it. Someone else mentions that Mr. Farrow, the floorwalker for the 2nd floor, docked Irene Kowalski a quarter for what he described in his incident report as insufficiently attentive posture. Irene was standing with her weight slightly more on her left foot than her right. Insufficiently attentive posture. 25 cents. You think about that while you finish your tea. You think about it walking down 4 flights of back stairs to the staff entrance, with its smell of damp coats and the faint ammonia of the cleaning supplies stored in the closet beside the time clock. You think about it while you wait for the girl in front of you to clock in, watching her insert her card and pull the lever and hear the mechanical stamp of it, like a verdict. You think about it while you do the same, and the clock reads 6:29, and you exhale. 1 minute. 1 minute of margin in a world where margins are how you survive. Haverford's department store occupies an entire city block and rises 7 stories above the street. It opened in 1891 as a modest dry goods operation and has been expanding ever since, consuming adjacent buildings, drilling through walls, connecting floors with passages that don't quite line up, so that walking from the haberdashery on the 3rd floor to the millinery on the 4th requires navigating a half stair that exists because at some point in the store's growth, 2 buildings of slightly different height were joined, and the practical solution was a step that every employee knows about and every customer trips on at least once. The building in 1913 employs 412 people on a regular weekday, and closer to 600 during December. It contains, on any given business day, approximately 3,500 square feet of selling floor, 87,000 units of merchandise, and a number of rules that nobody has ever counted, but which Agnes, in a moment of unusual philosophy, once estimated at more than the Bible and less interesting. From the outside, it is magnificent. The facade is white stone with large plate glass windows dressed fresh every Monday by a display team that arrives at 4 in the morning. The main entrance has brass revolving doors that take real effort to push, which is apparently intentional. Something about the slight resistance of entry creating a sense of occasion, of passage from one world into another. There is a canopy above the doors in deep green with the store's name in gold letters, and even now, 8 weeks in, walking past it on your way to the side entrance you are required to use, you feel something. not quite awe, something more complicated. The recognition that whatever is happening inside that building, whatever system you are part of, it has been designed with extraordinary care to produce specific feelings in the people who approach it. It just wasn't designed to produce those feelings in you. You go in the side door, the way the building actually functions, and you leave the gold letters and the brass doors and the sense of occasion for the people who deserve it. The staff corridors behind the selling floor are a different country. Narrow and lit by bare bulbs. Walls painted a green that was probably optimistic in 1891 and has since faded to the colour of institutional surrender. Pipes run along the ceiling, steam pipes for the radiators, which heat the selling floors to a temperature calibrated for ladies in winter coats, which is to say slightly too warm for humans in uniform who are also standing still and carrying things. And alongside the steam pipes, the pneumatic tubes. The system that connects every cash register and every cashier's station on every floor to the counting office on the 5th floor. Brass cylinders slightly larger than your fist that can carry folded bills and written receipts and change from a sale completed on the basement floor to a cashier on the 5th floor in 45 seconds if the pressure is right and the tubes are clear. When the tubes are clear, you can hear them. A sound like someone blowing hard across the mouth of a bottle, but pressurized. A rush and a thud as the cylinder hits the receiver. Whoomp, and then the faint hiss of return. All day, everywhere in the building, this sound. You've started dreaming about it. Your job as a cash girl is not to operate the tubes. The tubes are for the cashiers. Your job is the human version of the same system. When a sale is made at one of the counters that operates without a tube connection, and there are still a few legacy counters in older sections, or counters where the tube has been out of service for 3 weeks and maintenance keeps saying they'll get to it, you take the cash and the receipt and you walk it to the nearest tube station, or if it's faster, directly to the counting office. You carry change back. You keep the transaction moving. You are the backup system for a mechanical system, which means you are called upon primarily when the mechanical system has failed, which is its own particular commentary on your position in the hierarchy. But there's more to it than that. You are also the first thing a new salesperson calls when they have too much cash at the register and need it moved before the amount draws attention. You are who a department head sends when a floor supervisor needs a message carried without going through the formal channels. You are in the specific economy of the store's information system, a wire, a nerve, a tube of your own. Fast, cheap, and expected to deliver without asking what you're delivering. You report to Miss Brennan, who manages the cash girl rotation from a desk behind a door on the 2nd floor that's always open. Not because Miss Brennan is accessible, but because Miss Brennan believes in being able to hear everything. Miss Brennan is 41 years old and has worked at Haverford since she was 20, which means she has spent more than half her life inside this building, and this fact has done something to her in the same way that long immersion in any particular substance does something to the material immersed. She is not cruel. Cruelty implies a choice being made, emotion being invested. Miss Brennan is past that. She is efficient. She looks at you with eyes that process your position, your condition, your readiness, and your likely reliability in about 3 seconds, and everything after that is logistics. Marsh, she says without looking up from the rotation sheet. 2nd floor, fabric to haberdashery, until 10. Then I need you on one covering for Daisy Chen, who has a female complaint and will be out until noon. Go. You go. Section C on the second floor runs from the fabric counters along the east wall to the ready-made department near the central staircase, and it smells. This is important. The smell of each section is its own taxonomy. It smells of sizing. The chemical stiffening applied to fabric before display, slightly sweet and slightly sharp, like a well-laundered handkerchief, but more industrial, more scaled. Hundreds of bolts of cloth stored in the shelving along the back wall, organised by type and then by colour within type, all of them releasing this same faint chemical exhalation into the air of the second floor. The second floor is the floor of serious women. First floor is cosmetics and accessories, which draws a certain kind of customer, brisk and purposeful, usually, or young and uncertain, or occasionally the kind of woman who wants to try 17 shades of face powder and buy none of them. Second floor is fabric and pattern and domestic goods, which draws women who have come to do something. Women with a purpose and a budget and a mental list. Women who will ask you very specific questions about thread count and bolt width, and whether this particular twill will hold its colour after 3 washings, and they are asking because they have already done this calculation several times in their lives, and they know what they need to know. You are not permitted to answer these questions. You are a cash girl. You carry money. When a woman asks you something about the fabric, you find the nearest sales assistant and you redirect the question, and you do this without making the woman feel dismissed, which is a social skill you are learning at speed. Mrs. Aldridge is behind the main fabric counter when you arrive, and she's already in the middle of a transaction with a woman in a blue coat who wants something specific in a wool serge. You catch Agnes's advice. Don't make eye contact, and you station yourself by the tube station at the east end of the counter, and you wait. Mrs. Aldridge is 53 years old, and has the quality of a person who has won a long argument that started before you were born. She's not tall, but she stands as if she is, with a specific posture that seems almost architectural. Back absolutely straight, shoulders back and down, chin level, hands folded at the counter's edge. Her uniform is the same black as yours, but on her it looks like a choice, like a decision. She's been at Haverford's for 22 years. She was here before the third floor existed. She was here when the founder's son took over the business, and she watched him learn what his father knew. She was here when the pneumatic tube system was installed. She can remember the sound of hammering through the walls for 3 weeks while the workmen chased pipes through the building skeleton, and she has outlasted the men who installed it. She will probably outlast you. She finishes the transaction without once looking at you, though you're certain she is aware of you in the same peripheral procedural way that a general is aware of the ground beneath their feet. The sale totals $4.60. The customer produces a $5 bill. Without turning, without hesitation, Mrs. Aldridge says, "Marsh." You step forward. She places the $5 bill and the handwritten receipt on the counter. She does not look at you. She's already turning back to the customer with a small professional smile that is genuinely warm in a way that seems impossible, given everything you've just observed. But there it is. You take the bill and the receipt. You turn and walk to the tube station. You roll the bill around the receipt, load it into the brass cylinder. There's a specific technique. One end first, a slight compression, the spring catch. Close the cap, push the cylinder into the intake. The whomp as it catches and goes. 30 seconds. You wait. The return cylinder arrives with the change and a stamped receipt. You take the change to the counter. Mrs. Aldridge takes it without looking up, counts it in a single practised fan of her fingers, and delivers it to the customer with the warmth that is apparently stored separately from the part of her brain that acknowledges cash girls. That's it. That's the job. This transaction, 40 times an hour, all day. Carrying currency between the human being who earned it and the machine that processes it, and back again. You're the interval between the sale and the completion of the sale. You're a pause made physical. You've done this for 8 weeks and you are good at it. Not good in a way that earns praise. Cash girls do not earn praise. They earn the absence of correction. But good in the way that means you've stopped making the small errors that cost money. You no longer drop the cylinders. You no longer load them backwards, which creates a jam in the tube that requires a maintenance call and a look from Miss Brennan that is worth roughly the same as being called an idiot, except it takes less time. You no longer forget to wait for the return before leaving the station. You no longer cut corners on the receipt verification, which seems like it would save time and does, right up until it doesn't, at which point the time it doesn't save is multiplied by approximately 30 and served back to you cold. You have learned this building the way you once learned your mother's kitchen. By feel, by failure, by the accumulated minor corrections of every surface you've encountered. You know the floor, the marble of the selling areas, which looks continuous but isn't. There are hairline variations in level, heaved slightly by a decade of winter frost and spring thaw working through the foundation, and in the second floor fabric department there is a section near the central aisle where the marble dips almost imperceptibly, just enough to catch a heel if you're moving fast, which Mrs. Aldridge knows, and uses as a small taxonomy of the reliable. The girls who catch the dip and adjust, reliable. The girls who stumble, potential trouble. The girls who haven't noticed it yet, new. You noticed it on day 4. Mrs. Aldridge said nothing, but there was a slight adjustment in how she positioned the receipt when she handed it to you. 2 millimeters. You didn't know what it meant at the time. You know now it meant, I see you. Not approval, not affection. Just the acknowledgement that you were paying attention, and that paying attention was the beginning of belonging here. Around 8 o'clock the floor becomes alive. This is the thing about department stores in 1913 that visitors don't understand until they're inside it. The way the energy changes when the doors open and the public enters. It's not like turning on a light. It's more like releasing something that was contained. The temperature rises slightly, not from the bodies alone, but from the shift in air pressure as the revolving doors spin and the street air pushes in. The sound changes, the particular hush of an empty selling floor. And it is a specific hush, not silence. The building is never quite silent. There's always the hiss of the tubes and the distant sound of stock being moved and the maintenance man's cart rattling somewhere on 3. That hush folds itself away and the day begins. Haverford's opens its main doors at 8:30 on weekdays. But the selling floor has already been operating for an hour before that. Every counter must be stocked and dressed by 8. Every display must be checked. Every price tag must be facing the correct direction, which is toward the customer and slightly angled, because someone in management read a study about the psychology of pricing. And now all price tags must be angled at 30 degrees from vertical, and this is enforced. Every lamp must be working. Every surface must have been treated with the damp cloth that the cleaning staff has already been over once, but which each department head applies again personally, because the cleaning staff's definition of clean and the selling floor's definition of clean are not identical, and one of them has a customer coming. Mrs. Aldridge runs her cloth along the edge of the glass display case at exactly 8:12. the same time every morning, reaching into the corners with a precision that suggests she has measured them. She has, probably. Over 22 years, you measure a great many things without realizing you're doing it. By 8:30, Section C looks like a picture of itself, the kind of picture they print in trade catalogues. This is what a fabric department should look like. This is the aspiration. Every bolt faced, every roll measured, every drawer of buttons and trim arranged by size from largest to smallest, or by colour from light to dark. There's a particular kind of order that is not natural. Nothing that people touch all day every day can stay this ordered naturally. And that means this order is manufactured, rebuilt from scratch every morning, maintained through constant invisible labour. Every time a customer pulls a bolt from the shelf, someone replaces it at the first possible moment. This is the work. The visible work is the sale. The invisible work is everything that makes the sale look effortless. You are part of the invisible work. The first customer of the day to Section C is a woman in her late 30s in a good coat who wants black wool for a dress, and is apparently not certain exactly what kind of black she wants, which is a more complex problem than it sounds, because black fabric in 1913 comes in enough distinct varieties that they require an educated discussion. Flat black, black with a slight sheen, black with a nap like velvet without being velvet, black that is actually a very dark navy, which some women want and some women would find deeply offensive to be sold. Black that photographs well, which matters more than you might expect because photographs are a social technology, and women in 1913 are beginning to understand that how you look in a photograph is a separate and distinct consideration from how you look in a room. Mrs. Aldridge handles this with the focused attention of a physician diagnosing something. She pulls 3 bolts in sequence, each one with a single practiced lift that looks effortless, but requires the full rotation of her shoulder in a way that she will feel tonight, that she has felt every night for 22 years. Laying the lengths of fabric on the viewing cloth along the counter, and speaking about each one with the specific vocabulary of someone who has spent enough time in the presence of fabric to know it the way a sommelier knows wine. Not just the facts she could recite in her sleep, but the texture of the knowledge, the felt sense of it, the accumulated understanding that this particular wool behaves differently in a winter room than in a summer church, and that the customer in front of her probably needs to know this. You watch from the tube station. You have a moment between transactions. You are not supposed to be watching Mrs. Aldridge. You're supposed to be available, attentive, ready. But you're watching anyway, and you know you're getting away with it because Mrs. Aldridge is too occupied with the customer to also be managing you, which is the only window in which you can learn anything directly. This is how you learn things here, not from instruction, not from any kind of formal training, because there isn't any, not at the cash girl level. You learn by watching the people above you in the hierarchy in the rare moments when they are not watching you back. You learn by accumulation, by proximity, by the slow absorption of how things work through simple repeated exposure. It's the oldest form of education in the world, and it's almost entirely illegible. You can't point to a lesson. You can't identify a teacher. You just find yourself knowing things one day that you didn't know the week before, and the knowing feels less like learning and more like becoming. You're becoming something here. You're not sure yet what. At 9:45, a tube cylinder arrives from the counting office. Not the usual change return. You can tell by the weight, by the slight different balance when you pull it from the receiver. You open it. Inside, a folded note written in the tight, economical hand of the counting office on a slip of green paper. The green paper means it's from the section supervisor level or above. You've seen green paper twice, you read it. Then you take it to Mrs. Aldridge. She's in the middle of a third customer. She takes the note with a hand not engaged in demonstrating the drape of a satin finish crepe, reads it without changing her expression, folds it, and places it in her uniform pocket in one smooth motion that the customer doesn't register at all, and resumes the drape demonstration without a pause that any observer would notice. You go back to your station. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Aldridge finishes the transaction, sends the customer off with a wrapped parcel and a small bow of the head, turns to you and says, "Who gave you that note?" "The tube," you say. "I know it came through the tube. Who sent it?" "I didn't read the signature." "You did read the signature. It said Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore is the general floor superintendent. He is 3 levels above Mrs. Aldridge in the visible hierarchy of the store. But the hierarchy of the store is not entirely the hierarchy visible on the organizational chart, and Mrs. Aldridge's position within the invisible hierarchy is not exactly reflected in her title. You read his name and knew that what you were carrying was not just a note, but a message about the relationship between 2 people who have been navigating each other for longer than you've been alive. Mrs. Aldridge looks at you for a moment. Her expression does not change, but something in it adjusts, like a painting being slightly reframed. "Fine," she says. "Back to your station." You go back to your station. At 10 o'clock, you are relieved and sent to the first floor to cover for Daisy Chen, who has what Miss Brennan called a female complaint, and what is almost certainly a consequence of standing on marble floors for 10 hours a day for 3 months without adequate footwear, because adequate footwear costs money Daisy doesn't have. The first floor is different. The second floor has the energy of purpose, women who came here to accomplish something. The first floor has the energy of desire, cosmetics, accessories, jewellery displayed in cases with mirrored backs that multiply the sparkle of the pieces tenfold, which is intentional, handbags, scarves, gloves, everything near the entrance, everything designed to intercept the customer the moment she comes through the revolving door, and the slight intoxication of entering this particular building begins when she is at her most susceptible to the specific form of optimism that retail depends on. Maybe this will make me different. Maybe I'll be the version of myself that carries this bag. The first floor also smells different. The second floor smells like work. Useful, practical work, fabric and sizing, and the clean smell of things being made into other things. The first floor smells like the idea of something. The perfume counter alone is a kind of climate. You pass through it and carry the smell with you for an hour. Jasmine and something heavier underneath. Something that costs more than your weekly wage in a small crystal bottle. It coats the inside of your nose, almost tangible, and for a few minutes after passing through it, the world has a different texture. Daisy's station is at the accessories counter near the glove display. The salesgirl working gloves is a woman named Patricia, who is 23 and has been at Haverford's for 4 years, which puts her at a very specific place in the hierarchy. Experienced enough to have authority, not experienced enough to have Mrs. Aldridge's kind of authority, which means she is in the position of wanting to be obeyed without yet having the gravity to enforce it, which makes her the kind of colleague who tests the edges of every interaction. "You're the fill-in," Patricia says. "Yes." Daisy does things a certain way. You wait. The receipts go in the left slot, not the right. She has a system. You look at the station. The left slot and the right slot are identical and unlabelled, and the difference between them is a distinction that exists entirely in Daisy's arrangement of her own workspace, which you are temporarily inhabiting. This is not really about the slots. "I'll follow your lead," you say. Patricia looks at you with an expression that is trying to decide if this is submission or subversion, and has not yet reached a conclusion. She turns back to her customer. You learn Daisy's station in about 4 minutes. It is, as workstations go, organised with the logic of someone who has made a small space entirely their own, which is what happens when you spend enough time in a single location. You begin to impose your own order on it, and the order becomes legible, almost biographical. Daisy keeps the extra receipt paper folded in thirds on the left side. The pencil is always the one on the right because it's sharper. The tube station is slightly angled because the alignment of the receiver on this counter is slightly off, and instead of reporting it to maintenance, Daisy has compensated by changing the angle of her own approach, which is a more efficient solution, and also says something about Daisy. 3 transactions, then a 4th, then a customer who wants to pay with a personal check, which requires consultation with Patricia, who requires consultation with the floor supervisor, who is Mr. Reed, a man of 40 who wears his authority the way some men wear clothes that's slightly too small, with a constant quiet effort to appear comfortable. Mr. Reed's job is to supervise the selling floor, to handle complaints, to watch for the specific behaviours that indicate either potential theft or potential dissatisfaction, which in a department store in 1913 are the 2 great enemies of commerce. He approves the check. Then he looks at you with the expression of someone confirming a theory. "You're the Marsh girl, cash girl, 2nd floor." "Yes, sir." "You're filling in for Chen." "Yes, sir." He looks at you for another 2 seconds, not appraising in the way that word sometimes means, more like cataloguing. He's building a file. "Return to Chen Station when she's back," he says. "Don't move to another station without Miss Brennan's authorization." "Of course." He moves on down the floor, hands clasped behind his back, carrying himself through the selling floor with the particular walk of a floorwalker, unhurried but covering ground. The kind of walk that says, "I am not going anywhere specific, but I am going there with intention." The floorwalker is one of the creatures of the department store that has no equivalent in the world outside. He is not a manager in the office sense. He does not make decisions about purchasing or hiring or strategy. He does not have a desk in the traditional sense, though there is a small area on each floor marked for supervisory purposes. His office is the floor itself. His function is presence. He is the visible reminder that the system has eyes, and his particular skill, the skill that takes years to develop and is not exactly teachable, is the ability to communicate authority through physical position alone, where he stands, which direction he faces, the pace of his movement down the aisle. These things are not accidental. They are a language, and the people on the selling floor are fluent in it whether they realize it or not. When Mr. Reed stands near the accessories counter, Patricia's posture improves by approximately 2 degrees. When he turns and walks toward the cosmetics section, she relaxes by 1 degree. When he disappears around the corner toward the other side of the floor, she turns to the girl beside her and says something in a low voice, and they both glance toward where he was, and then back at their work with the particular expression of people who've just confirmed a mutual understanding. You say nothing. You're new enough to be transparent. You have not yet accumulated enough of a reputation to be the subject of the conversation, which is its own form of freedom. 11 o'clock. Daisy Chen returns. walking slightly carefully, with the controlled movement of someone managing a specific discomfort. She's 20 years old and has a face that arranges itself naturally into a kind of brightness that seems to be her default expression, regardless of what's happening, which is either a gift or a thing she learned and which you cannot quite determine. "Thank you," she says, taking her station back. "How is Patricia?" "Fine?" Daisy raises her eyebrows very slightly. "Fine." Coming from a cash girl about a senior sales girl, fine is a complete sentence with a complete meaning. "The slot thing? She mentioned it. She mentions it to everyone." Daisy settles into her station, a small unconscious exhale of a person returning to a specific arrangement of space and objects that fits them. She adjusts the pencil by 2 millimeters. She's not bad, really. She just needs to feel like she knows things other people don't. You file this away. You file everything away here, because everything here is information, and information is the only currency that doesn't require a tube to carry. Miss Brennan reassigns you at noon to a special task. There is a delivery coming from the warehouse, a large delivery of pre-Christmas stock, and deliveries require human coordination at a scale that the tube system wasn't designed for. The delivery arrives at the loading dock on the north side of the building, goes through the stock room, and needs to be logged and routed to the appropriate department before it can be prepared for the selling floor. This is stockroom work, which is below the selling floor in the spatial hierarchy of the building. Literally below, the main stockroom is in the basement, but above the cash girl role in terms of physical complexity, so it represents either a test or a punishment, and you can't yet tell which. The loading dock smells like the outside. Exhaust from the delivery truck. They use trucks now, large motorized vehicles replacing the horse-drawn wagons that were standard 10 years ago, and the smell of the engine is different from horses, chemical and clean, in a way that horse smell never was, but also somehow colder. And under the engine smell, the cold autumn air pushing through the open dock doors, and the specific smell of cardboard cartons and wood crating, and the particular sweetness of things wrapped in tissue paper. There are 4 of you assigned the delivery. You and 2 other cash girls whose names you know. Clara Watts, and a girl everyone calls Suki whose real name is Susanna, and a stock boy named Thomas who is 16 and has forearms that are already thick from months of moving things. The crates are heavy. This is the first piece of information you receive at the loading dock, and it is not announced. It is simply demonstrated when Thomas tries to lift the first carton off the truck and adjusts his grip and his stance in a way that signals recalibration. You watch him and adjust your own expectations accordingly. The cartons are roughly 18 inches square and weigh, you estimate when you take your first one, somewhere between 30 and 40 pounds. They contain glassware, nested in tissue and straw, which explains the weight. Your job is to take the carton from the dock, carry it through the stockroom corridor, and place it on the appropriate trolley for routing to the glassware department on the 3rd floor. 30 feet, maybe 40. A manageable distance if you do it once. Over the course of an hour, your arms will remind you that 30 feet is not a fixed number, but a variable one, and the variable is how many times you've already done it. By the 3rd carton, you have adjusted your grip. By the 5th, you have adjusted your posture, redistributing the weight lower, close to the center of your body, the way you used to carry water buckets back home, which is a thing you did not expect to need here, but which your body remembers before your mind catches up. By the 10th, there is a specific warmth running from your shoulders down through your forearms and into your fingers that will become pain tomorrow morning and that you will explain to no one because everyone here is dealing with the same thing, and explaining it is not how things work. Thomas notices. He notices the grip adjustment. He says nothing about it, but he passes the next carton to you at a slightly different angle, adjusted so the weight sits better in the carry. It's a small thing. It takes a fraction of a second. It is the kind of kindness that costs nothing and saves something, and in a place where most forms of kindness have been systematically removed by the requirements of the hierarchy, small practical kindnesses are what's left, and they matter more than they would anywhere else. From the country, he says, not looking at you, taking the next carton. Ohio, you say. You? Warsaw, Indiana. He glances at you sideways. 2 years in September. Does it get easier? He considers this with the seriousness of someone who has been asked this by many people and has learned not to lie about it. Different things get easier, he says. Your feet stop hurting so much by about month 4. You stop getting lost on the upper floors. You stop flinching every time Reed walks past. He puts down a carton, takes the next one. The cold in the stock rooms doesn't get easier, and December doesn't get easier. December just becomes a thing you survive and then forget until it's December again. You carry the next carton. Your fingers grip the rough cardboard, which has absorbed some moisture from the dock air and has a slight give to it that isn't quite trustworthy, so you adjust, pressing your palms flat against the sides. The weight settles. 30 feet. What's December like? Thomas is quiet for a moment while he roots his carton. Loud, he says. Very loud. And fast. And everybody's angry about something because everybody's under pressure, and the pressure comes from above. The floor managers are under pressure from the department heads, and the department heads are under pressure from the buyers, and the buyers are under pressure from Mr. Whitmore and Mr. Whitmore. He pauses, lifting another carton. Mr. Whitmore is under pressure from the owner, except we never see the owner, so for all practical purposes Mr. Whitmore is God. I've never seen Mr. Whitmore, you say. You will. He walks the floors in December, every floor every day, looking. Thomas sets down his carton. Just make sure when he does, you're where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't have an expression on your face that could be interpreted as insufficiently committed. They can dock you for your expression. They docked Morrison last December for what the report called a demeanour inconsistent with the festive spirit of the selling season. You think about this while you carry another carton. The cold dock air pushes through the open door in irregular gusts, raising the temperature differential between the loading dock and the warm corridor behind you into something you feel in your skin. 1 step out, 1 step back in, and each time you go back in, the warmth of the stock room encloses you with the sudden intimacy of a room that's been lived in by too many people, all of whom have been carrying heavy things. This is where the building doesn't pretend. The selling floor is a performance. Up there, everything is deliberate. The lights, the arrangement, the temperature, the smell, the posture of the people working it, the exact angle of the price tags. It is a constructed world, and it is constructed with great skill and consistent maintenance, and it functions the way a stage set functions. As long as you are on the right side of it, it is completely convincing. Down here, the building is just a building. Concrete floors and exposed pipes and the smell of things stored and moved. No one has arranged the light for effect. The bare bulbs are positioned for function, not atmosphere, and they cast the flat, slightly yellow light of utility. The sounds are raw. The wheeze of the delivery truck's engine, The scrape of heavy cartons on the dock, the occasional hollow metal clang of a trolley being repositioned. Nothing has been softened. But this is also where the building is honest, and there is a kind of relief in that. You carry cartons for an hour and a half. By the end, your arms are burning in a specific qualified way. Not injury, not anything that will last longer than tomorrow, but the honest accumulation of effort, the body's record of what it has done. You are warm despite the cold from the dock, warm from the inside outward. The kind of warmth that comes from working hard with large muscle groups. And you're aware of your own body in the specific way that physical labour produces, a kind of present tense vividness, every joint and tendon briefly illuminated by its own effort. You return to the second floor at 1:30. Mrs. Aldridge is on her lunch break, or whatever Mrs. Aldridge does when she's not behind the fabric counter. You have never seen her eat, and cannot entirely picture it, which is a failure of imagination you acknowledge. The replacement is a younger salesgirl, maybe 25, who handles the counter with competence but without the absolute precision that defines Mrs. Aldridge's presence, and the counter shows it in small ways. One bolt slightly off its mark, a drawer of buttons not quite fully closed. Not failure, just the absence of perfection, which is itself a kind of information. At 2:00, something happens. A customer at the fabric counter, a woman, well-dressed, perhaps 40, with the specific bearing of someone who shops at Haverford's, regularly enough to feel proprietary about the experience, gets into a disagreement with the replacement salesgirl about the width of a lace trim that was advertised in the Wednesday catalogue. The disagreement begins quietly. These things always begin quietly. The customer explains, with the particular patience of someone who is quite certain they are right, and is allocating patience as a courtesy rather than as an acknowledgement of genuine uncertainty, that the Wednesday catalogue described a lace trim of 1.5 inches, and the trim being shown to her is, by her measurement, 1.25 inches. The salesgirl explains, with the particular patience of someone who is trying to resolve a situation before it requires escalation, that the catalogue description referred to the trim in a different colourway, and that this particular trim is correctly described as 1.25 inches, which is listed on the counter card which the salesgirl is now pointing to, with the controlled urgency of someone showing evidence they hope will resolve the matter. The customer looks at the counter card, then at the salesgirl, then at the counter card. "I want to speak with your supervisor," she says. This is the phrase. This is the phrase that changes the acoustic environment of the immediate area, the way a dropped glass changes the acoustic environment of a room. The nearby customers register it. The salesgirl registers it. You register it from the tube station, where you have been observing with the peripheral attention of someone who has been on this floor long enough to develop a sense for when things are about to require additional human infrastructure. The salesgirl turns to you. You go for Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed is on the floor. He is always on the floor. You find him near the ready-made department and deliver the information with the economy of phrasing that you've developed for exactly this. Customer dispute at Fabric, Mrs. Aldridge's section. He moves immediately, with the speed of a man whose entire professional identity is defined by resolving these situations before they flower into scenes, and you follow at a slight distance that communicates availability without presumption. What follows is a small performance in the grammar of retail hierarchy. Mr. Reed arrives at the counter. He acknowledges the customer first. A slight, courteous inclination of the head, the body's equivalent of a calling card. then the salesgirl, then the counter card, then the fabric in question. He handles the lace trim with 2 fingers, briefly, and manages to perform a kind of consideration that contains within it the suggestion that he is taking the matter with appropriate seriousness without committing himself to any particular outcome. "Mrs. he begins. "Hartley," the customer says. "Mrs. Hartley, I understand there's been some confusion about the catalogue description. You watch. This is what the floorwalker is actually for. Not for catching thieves. The store detective handles actual theft, a different species of authority entirely. But for this. For the moment when the system of commerce, which depends on the customer feeling that they have been correctly served, shows a seam. Mr. Reed's job is to close the seam, not always by giving the customer what they want, sometimes by providing a satisfying explanation of why they don't get what they want. The outcome matters less than the quality of the experience of the resolution. He examines the catalogue description and the countercard and delivers, with the gravity of a judge, the determination that the catalogue description was for a related product, and that Haverford's regrets any confusion, and he offers Mrs. Hartley a 15% reduction on her purchase of the 1¼ inch trim, which is genuinely a good deal on good trim, and he offers it in a way that presents it as a courtesy from the store to a valued customer rather than as an admission of error. Mrs. Hartley accepts. She leaves with the trim and a slightly elevated opinion of Haverford's commitment to customer satisfaction, which was the goal. Mr. Reed turns to the salesgirl and says 2 words. You don't hear them. But the salesgirl's posture changes. He walks away. The floor absorbs him. You go back to the tube station. The afternoon passes in the rhythm that you've learned. Transactions, movement, tubes, waiting, transactions again. Around 3 o'clock the floor fills differently. The morning shoppers, the purposeful women with lists, have mostly completed their errands, and the afternoon shoppers tend to be either women with more time than purpose, browsing, or women who work elsewhere and have used their half-day or their early release to come in and do something specific, which means they are in a hurry. The energy of the afternoon is faster but less focused, and the transactions require a different kind of attention. You have to be quicker because the customer is quicker, less patient, doesn't want to wait for change even when waiting is unavoidable. At 4 o'clock a cylinder arrives at your tube station that isn't for you. You realise this when you read the routing slip inside it, which is addressed to the counting office on the 5th floor and has apparently been misrouted. The tube system runs on a simple address code. Each counter has a number, each department has a letter, and the routing slip specifies both. Someone at this counter has loaded a cylinder for the 5th floor counting office and addressed it incorrectly, so it came here instead. You examine it. The routing slip shows counter 14C, which is your station. The correct destination is 14A, the counting office intake. You reroute it. Load it back in for 14A, push it through. Whoomp. This is a minor thing. This happens. The system is designed to accommodate minor errors, which is why there are cash girls in addition to the tubes, human backup for mechanical failure and human error both. Except when you load it back, the cylinder comes back again in 30 seconds. The same cylinder, the same routing slip, the same destination that the tube is apparently refusing to accept. This means the 14A line is jammed. A jammed tube is a maintenance issue, but a jammed tube carrying cash, which this cylinder almost certainly contains, is weighted the right way, is also a floor supervisor issue, because cash in transit is accounted for, and cash that isn't arriving where it's supposed to is cash that will be noticed in the evening count. You go for Mr. Reed again. He's not where you left him. The selling floor absorbs people. You walk the floor with the controlled urgency of someone who is not running. Because running on the selling floor is one of the things that requires explanation in writing, but who is also not performing the measured drift of someone with no particular purpose. You are occupying the exact middle ground between urgency and composure that you've spent 8 weeks figuring out. You find him near cosmetics, speaking with a woman in a smart coat who appears to be either a customer or someone from management. You can't tell. You wait 2 paces back, visible, not interrupting. He sees you. He finishes his sentence, turns. You tell him about the tube in 12 words. He takes 12 words to respond, which includes the information that maintenance for tube issues goes through a slip in the stockroom log, and that if the cylinder is carrying cash, it should be held at the receiving station and logged until the tube is cleared. You go back and hold the cylinder and log it. This is an additional 30 minutes of your afternoon, standing at the station with the logged cylinder, waiting for maintenance to clear the tube, which they do at 4:52, at which point you reroute the cylinder and it goes through cleanly, and you note the resolution in the log and the transaction is complete. But here is what you've learned from this specific 30 minutes. When the system breaks, someone has to be the system. In those 30 minutes, 4 other transactions needed cash carried from Section C to the counting office. The tube was down, so you carried them by hand, physically walking the receipts, and cash up the back stairs to the 5th floor counting office, returning with change, walking back down. 4 trips in 30 minutes. Your legs are very aware of the stairs by the end of it, but the transactions were not delayed. The count will be clean at the close of business. No money was lost or held up in a way that would show on the books. The customers got their change. The sale was completed for each one. You did this without being asked to do it differently. You just did what the situation required. Miss Brennan says nothing to you about this at the end of your shift. She says nothing to anyone about anything unless it's a problem. This is how you know it wasn't a problem. 5:30. The selling floor begins its wind down. The last customers filter toward the exits. The cleaning staff appears at the edges, pushing their carts with patient, unhurried motion of people who have learned that the floor won't empty faster because they want it to. The sales staff begin their end-of-day routines, facing shelves, returning items to their positions, completing the record-keeping that has been accumulating all day. You're released by Miss Brennan at 5:45, with a note in the rotation log that places you on Section D, 3rd floor, tomorrow. 3rd floor is housewares, different smell, different customer, different rhythm. You file this away. The walk from the selling floor through the staff corridor to the back stairs takes you past the stockroom entrance, past the maintenance cupboard, past the small cubicle that serves as Mr. Reed's on-floor administrative space, where the light is still on, and you can see the edge of his desk through the gap in the door, and the suggestion of a man filling out paperwork with the slightly defeated energy of someone who has survived the day and is now managing its documentation. Up the back stairs, 4 flights. At the end of each day, the back stairs carry the particular smell of 40-plus people making the same climb. Bodies, shoe leather, the lingering ghost of whatever the various floors smell like transferred through proximity. The 2nd floor fabric smell. The 1st floor perfume. The 3rd floor wax and metal. All of it stratified in the stairwell so that climbing 4 flights is also, in a small, atmospheric way, a tour of the building. 6th floor. The dormitory corridor. The small kitchen with the same 6:30 morning smell now transmuted by the evening into something colder. The tea smell gone, the bread smell gone, replaced by whatever Mrs. Conley is cooking from the stock she's allowed to order for the live-in girls, which tonight appears to be a stew of some kind, the smell arriving 10 feet before the kitchen does, warm and meaty and welcome in the way that simple hot food is always welcome when you're tired enough. Agnes is already in the kitchen. She has her shoes off, which is technically against the rules in shared spaces, but which everyone does after the floor, because after 10 hours on marble, the removal of shoes is not a preference but a physiological necessity. She has a cup of tea and the expression of someone who has survived today specifically and is not yet thinking about tomorrow. Section C all day, she asks. Morning section C, then first floor for Chen, then loading dock, then C again. Agnes raises an eyebrow. The loading dock is notable. Cash girls don't usually do loading dock work. Brennan is testing you, she says. Testing me for what? Agnes considers. There's a stock girl position opening in January. Morrison's leaving. Morrison's been at Haverford's for 3 years, and her family's pushing her to leave and she's going. Brennan knows it. She drinks her tea. A stock girl is a step up. Better assignment, slightly better pay, slightly better everything. I've been here 8 weeks. I know, but Brennan watches. She always watches. Agnes sets down the cup. The dock work was the test for whether you can handle physical work without complaining. The tube malfunctioned today. I heard about it in the supper line. News travels fast in the back corridors. That was the test for whether you solve problems or report them. I did both, you say. Exactly right. Agnes looks at you with something that is not quite warmth and not quite professional appraisal, and is in fact exactly the middle ground between them. Do both, always. That's what they're looking for. Mrs. Conley serves supper at 6:30. The stew is better than it looks, which is the best possible outcome for institutional cooking. There is bread, today's bread this time, and the kitchen feels, briefly, genuinely, warm. Not the performing warmth of the first floor perfume or the managed temperature of the selling floor. Actual warmth from the stove, from the bodies of 6 tired women sitting close together, from the specific animal comfort of eating hot food at the end of a day that required something from you. You eat without talking much. Everyone eats without talking much. This is understood. The talking comes later, after the immediate need of food is addressed, when the body's most urgent messages have been received, and the mind can return to the secondary business of being a person, with opinions and observations, and a social existence. Clara Watts asks about your afternoon on the dock. You describe the cartons, the weight of them, the adjustment of grip, the cold air from the delivery truck's exhaust. Clara makes a face. She had the dock last month, still remembers it. Your arms tomorrow, she says. You know. After supper, in the half hour before the unofficial lights out that Miss Brennan enforces through the particular social technology of appearing in the corridor at 9:30 and not leaving until the rooms are quiet, you sit on the edge of your bed and you take your shoes off. The relief is immediate and physical and completely private in the way that relief from pain always is. The specific sensation of pressure releasing from bones that have been holding weight for 10 hours, each small joint settling back into something closer to its natural position, the tendons lengthening. You flex your feet, slowly, watching the movement of your own toes with a kind of detached attention, as though cataloguing the work they've done. Your feet are different than they were in Millhaven, not dramatically, Not yet, but different in ways you can see and feel. The skin along the ball of the left foot has thickened slightly. There is a callus forming on the right heel, a small area of skin that has decided through repeated compression to become something harder. Your toes have opinions now. Each one carries a slight individual complaint about today that they're delivering in aggregate, a general low-grade communication that amounts to, "We did this. Acknowledge it." You acknowledge it. You sit there for a minute just feeling the relief of not standing, not carrying, not moving toward or away from anything. Outside the 6th floor window, the city continues. You can hear it faintly through the glass. The sounds of a city in the early evening, a different acoustic profile than the day sounds, a lower register, the rattle of traffic thinning and being replaced by the sounds of leisure and home, and whatever people do at the end of days that are nothing like yours. You think about the day. You think about Mrs. Aldridge and the way she runs her cloth along the edge of the counter at 8:12. You think about the note from Mr. Whitmore and the adjustment in her expression that you almost didn't catch. You think about Thomas on the loading dock, passing you the carton at the better angle, the 2-second kindness of it. You think about Mr. Reed and the way he closed the scene with Mrs. Hartley, the economics of the moment, 15% discount for a customer's goodwill, and whether 15% was a calculation or an instinct, and what kind of experience produces an instinct like that. You think about what Agnes said, the stock girl position, January. You've been here 8 weeks. You've learned the floor, mostly. You've stopped losing money in the tubes. You've developed the walk, the controlled urgency walk, the I am available and attentive walk, the not running but nearly walk, so thoroughly that it is starting to happen without your having to think about it, which means the building is beginning to absorb you the way it has absorbed the others, the way it has absorbed Agnes and Daisy and Miss Brennan and Mrs. Aldridge, each one arriving from somewhere with a full and separate life and being slowly, carefully, systematically remade into a function, a cash girl, a sales girl, a floor supervisor, a department head. The hierarchy has a name for each step, a salary for each step, a specific set of rules for each step, different rules at different levels, not a single uniform rule set but a layered system that reveals itself gradually, each new layer only becoming visible when you advance far enough to be subject to it. You don't know, as a cash girl, what rules govern a department head, because those rules are not communicated downward. You will learn them when you become one, if you become one. This is one of the things that makes the hierarchy so effective as a mechanism of control. It is not a transparent system. At every level, you can see the level immediately above you and the level immediately below. You cannot see the full structure. You're navigating a building you can only see 2 floors of at a time, and yet you've already started to see further than 2 floors, not through authority or official communication, but through the accumulation of small observed things. The note from Mr. Whitmore to Mrs. Aldridge, arriving through the tube on green paper, the way Mr. Reed moved when you mentioned Section C with Mrs. Aldridge's section, the way Agnes described Miss Brennan's watching, the way Miss Brennan's rotation sheet tells a story, if you know how to read the assignments as data. The people above you are not arbitrary in their power. They're not simply older or more fortunate or in a better position by chance. They know things. They have acquired, through years of exactly the kind of daily accumulation you are currently engaged in, an understanding of how this system works, and that understanding is their real capital, not the title, not the slightly better wage, the knowledge, And knowledge, you are starting to understand, is the thing that passes here through observation rather than instruction, through the system of people watching people, which is the same system by which every department head watches for theft, and every floorwalker monitors posture, and every department head tracks transactions, turned back on the watchers themselves by the people being watched. You watch, you file, you adjust. This is the currency of the cash girl. You have no power of decision. You have no customer relationship to speak of. You have no counter of your own, no territory, no formal authority of any kind. What you have is movement. You move through the entire selling floor, every hour, every day. You pass every counter. You interact with every section. You're invisible in the way that human infrastructure is always invisible, not because you are truly unseen, but because you are categorically unnoticed, because you exist within a mental category that powerful people do not look at directly. But because you are invisible, you see everything. Mrs. Aldridge and the way she handles her cloth, Patricia and the left slot, Thomas and the carton angle, Mr. Reed and the 12 words, Mrs. Hartley and the 15%. All of this is yours. All of this is stored and available. And you are 17 years old and you have been here 8 weeks and you already know things about this building that people who have been here for a year don't know. Simply because they stopped looking when the looking stopped being urgent. You're still at the urgency stage. Everything is still new enough to require attention. This is possibly the most valuable thing about being new. You pull the blanket up. The room has cooled since supper. The radiator in the dormitory is on the same steam system that heats the selling floor below, but 6 floors up and behind several walls the warmth has attenuated into something that is less a temperature and more a suggestion of one. You can feel the cold from the window glass through the air, a directional cold, the kind that comes from a specific location and arrives in a thin stream. The city sounds continue. A trolley car, its bell a clear bright note cutting through the lower ambient. A motor car, the engine a different texture from the delivery trucks, lighter, faster, gone in seconds. Somewhere below and to the right, a piano from a tavern or a parlour, the tune coming up intermittently with the wind, something you half recognise but can't place. You had, at home, in Millhaven, a window that looked out on the back field. At this time of night in October it would be dark in the particular way that country dark is dark, not the city's dark, which is perpetually interrupted by light from windows and street lamps and the general luminescent leak of a million electric bulbs, but a complete dark, a dark that has depth to it, that goes all the way down. You could hear from that window the sound of the far field and sometimes the river if the wind was right, and the dark outside it and the quiet of the house around you produced a silence that had a quality to it, a substance, the way silence does when it is genuine rather than merely the temporary absence of noise. You don't have that here, but you have this, the trolley bell, the motor car, the piano, the warmth of the dormitory room with 4 other bodies generating their own heat, the weight of the blanket over you, which is heavier than the one at home and holds its warmth differently, and the specific texture of it under your chin, which is slightly rough in a way that you have already mapped so thoroughly that you notice it without feeling it, the same way you no longer notice the tube sound or the smell of sizing. Agnes's breathing from across the room, already evening out into the long, slow rhythm of sleep. Clara's settling, the specific creak of her portion of the mattress as she finds her position. The dormitory above Haverford's department store, 6th floor, one of 40-odd women sleeping in the rooms along this corridor. and below you all the dark selling floor with its dressed counters and its angled price tags and its pneumatic tubes silent now. The building breathing through them without purpose, just the residual pressure of a system at rest. Tomorrow, 3rd floor, section D, housewares. You close your eyes. You're tired in a specific qualified way, not the tired of illness or despair, but the tired of use. Your body has been used today, heavily and specifically, and in ways that will be marginally easier tomorrow and considerably easier in 6 months. Your mind has been engaged in the particular sustained vigilance that the floor requires, the constant readiness, and the relaxation of that vigilance now, the permission to be unready, is its own form of profound relief. You will wake at 5:50. You will clock in at 6:29 or close to it. You will carry things and observe things and file things away. You will learn 3 more things about this building and 1 more thing about Mrs. Aldridge, and probably something about Section D that will be useful later. But that is tomorrow. Right now it is 8 weeks into your life at Haverford's department store, and the store is quiet below you, and the city is what it is outside your window, and you are 17 years old, and you are learning, at speed, the language of a place that was not built for you, and that will not tell you how to belong in it directly. You are learning it anyway. That's not nothing. That might actually be everything. The piano from the street below comes up 1 more time on a gust of wind, clearer now, something familiar, and then the wind shifts, and it's gone. Sleep comes the way it always comes when you've been on your feet all day. Not gradually, not with any transition you notice, just the edge of consciousness moving away from you in a slow recession, the way shorelines recede when you're on a boat, still visible, then smaller, then gone. The building breathes around you. This is where you live now. The weeks move differently inside a department store than they do outside one. Outside, time has seasons and weather, and the gradual darkening of evenings as October becomes November. You're aware of these things in the abstract. You can see the colour of the light through the store's plate glass windows changing, the quality of it becoming lower and more sideways as the year tips toward winter, and you can feel the temperature of the delivery dock growing colder each week, a degree at a time, as though the building's relationship with the outside world is being renegotiated in small increments. But inside the store, time is not measured in months or seasons. It is measured in transactions, in cycles of opening and closing, in the rhythms of stock delivery and display change, and the weekly count of the register receipts, which happen on Friday mornings in the counting office on the 5th floor, with a precision and formality that makes them feel like a religious observance, which in the economy of the store they basically are. You learn these rhythms the way you learned the floor, not as a body of knowledge but as a felt understanding, the way a musician learns rhythm, through repetition until it is in the body rather than the mind. By mid-November, 6 weeks after your first morning on Section C, you know without being told what stage of the week the store is in by the sound of the building. Monday morning has a particular acoustic character. Everything freshly dressed, everything in position, the specific quiet of surfaces that have not yet been touched. Wednesday afternoon has a different sound. The productive hum of midweek commerce at its most efficient, the tubes working at capacity, the cash registers accumulating their tallies. Friday has the particular pressure of closing the week's books, a tension in the back corridors that you can feel in the way Miss Brennan moves through the staff areas, slightly faster, slightly less available for conversation. And Saturday. Saturday is its own thing entirely. Haverford's is open 6 days a week. Sunday is closed by law and by the particular variety of Protestant respectability that the founder's family practiced and that has persisted as institutional culture long after the original family's direct involvement diminished to a minority shareholding and a portrait in the executive offices. But Saturday is the day when the city comes out, the day when the people who work all week and cannot take their leisure on a Tuesday afternoon, the clerks and the factory workers and the office girls and the tradespeople and the men with jobs that do not accommodate weekday shopping, all of them arrive at once, filling the main floor within an hour of opening with a density of bodies that the selling floor was not designed to handle comfortably, but handles anyway, because commerce does not wait for comfort. On your first Saturday you were overwhelmed. The noise of it, the register sounds and the tube sounds and the voice sounds, hundreds of simultaneous conversations producing a blended roar that sits at the upper edge of what you can process and then keeps going. And the movement of it, bodies everywhere. The aisles full, the counters 3 deep with customers waiting, and through all of it you running. Not technically running, but something very close to running, threading between coats and shopping bags, and the occasional child who's been placed somewhere out of the way and forgotten temporarily. You made 3 errors that Saturday, 2 minor ones, and one that required a notation in Miss Brennan's log. You got the notation. You did not make the same errors the following Saturday. By the 2nd Saturday you were competent. By the 5th Saturday you were fast. Speed is a thing the store rewards in a specific way, not with acknowledgement but with more work, which is its own commentary on the economics of competence. The girls who are fast get the harder assignments because they can handle them, and the harder assignments make them faster, and the speed makes them more valuable, and the value is expressed in the assignment rather than the wage. Because the wage is a separate negotiation that is handled once a year, in January, in conversations that happen in Miss Brennan's office with the door closed, and which no one discusses afterward. Not because they are sworn to secrecy, but because discussing your wages with your colleagues is one of the unwritten rules, one of the 400, and the enforcement mechanism for this particular rule is entirely social, which makes it more effective than a written policy. You don't know what Agnes earns. You know what you earn, $3.40 a week, the standard cash girl rate, plus a small premium for the evening hours when you work late during inventory. But you do not know what the rate will be in January when Miss Brennan calls you into the office, and you do not know how to think about that conversation yet. How to be in a room with Miss Brennan and ask for something different, without triggering the particular consequence that comes from asking for too much or too little. Agnes is who you ask about this, one evening in late November in the kitchen after supper, when it is just the 2 of you, and the dishes and the particular honesty that develops between people who share a small space for long enough. Agnes listens to the question. She puts down her dish. She thinks for a moment in the way Agnes always thinks, thoroughly, as if she's checking the construction of the thought before she speaks it. Miss Brennan, she says, respects 2 things, reliability and self-knowledge. She doesn't respect need. Lots of girls go into that office and tell her they need more because their boarding house went up, or their mother's sick, or whatever it is. She hears it. She doesn't respond to it. What she responds to is when you can tell her specifically what you've done that makes you worth more than you were worth last January. What did you tell her, you ask? Agnes picks up the dish again. I told her I'd resolved the Morrison stock error in March without escalating it, which saved the store a significant count discrepancy and saved Morrison her position, which was worth something in human capital terms. I told her I'd covered 3 separate absences in my section over the year, including 2 on days when I was the only available person, and coverage would otherwise have required pulling from another section, and I told her I expected a 30-cent a week increase. Did you get it? I got 25 cents. You file this away. The structure of the argument, the vocabulary of it, human capital terms, which is a phrase Agnes used deliberately, the way you use a specific tool for a specific job, and the gap between the ask and the outcome, which is not a failure but a calibration. What do you wish you'd done differently, you ask? Agnes looks at you over the dish. I wish I'd asked for 35 cents. In the 4th week of November, something changes in the building. It's not announced. Nothing at Haverford's is announced in the way that would make sense from the outside. There are no memos distributed to cash girls, no morning briefings, no general communications that travel down the hierarchy in legible form. Instead, things change, and you feel the change before you understand it, the way you feel weather changing before you can see the clouds. The change is in the pace of the stock movement. Every week, freight arrives and gets processed and distributed to the departments. But in the 4th week of November, the freight increases. Not slightly, significantly more than doubles, so that the loading dock is busy for 2 full days, with deliveries that come in 3 shifts, the trucks arriving before dawn and continuing through the evening, and the stockrooms filling with flat cartons and deep boxes and long packages wrapped in brown paper, and the specific dense smell of a great quantity of new things, unwrapped, the smell of manufactured goods fresh from warehouses, a combination of cardboard and machine oil, and the chemical off-gassing of new fabric and new leather and new glass. Christmas. It arrives at Haverford's not on December 1st, but in the last week of November, when the buying office has completed its calculations and the decisions made months earlier. In the summer, actually, when the buyers travel to the manufacturers and the importers and the design houses and sit in rooms, making choices about what the women of this city will want to give and receive in December. Those decisions arrive in physical form, filling the stockrooms floor to ceiling, and simultaneously the selling floor begins to change. The window display team, which normally works on Monday mornings, is now working every day, and they work at night, after closing when the floor is empty, so that each morning you arrive to a selling floor that has been transformed overnight in some specific calculated way. New arrangements appear in the windows, more elaborate than the usual displays, layered with artificial snow and carefully positioned merchandise, and the small paper characters that Mr. Hendricks, who runs the display team, and who you have seen exactly once in a back corridor looking deeply tired and carrying a large bolt of velvet, designs himself at a table in the display room on the 4th floor. The counters inside begin to change too. Seasonal goods appear, displacing the standard inventory to secondary positions. Colours shift, more red, more gold, more of the deep green that means Christmas in the visual language of retail, a language that has been in development for decades, and by 1913 is essentially complete. The grammar of Christmas selling as fixed and specific as any other grammar. You watch this transformation with the particular attention of someone who's been inside the building long enough to know what it looks like normally, and can therefore register what has changed. The cash girl sees everything. You see the display team's overnight work the morning after it's done. You see the stock arriving and being processed. You see the departments adjusting their arrangements to accommodate the new goods, the counters shifting slightly, items reorganized so that the expensive Christmas-appropriate merchandise is at eye level, and the ordinary everyday goods are lower, as though the store itself has changed what it thinks is important, which it has. In December, at Haverford's, everything is important if it's expensive, and nothing is important if it isn't. Miss Brennan calls you into her office on November 27th. It is the first time you've been inside Miss Brennan's office. The outside of it you know well. The always open door, the desk visible from the corridor, the specific authority of the space. Inside it is smaller than the outside suggested. There is the desk, which is completely covered with the rotation sheets and logs and correspondence that constitute Miss Brennan's entire understanding of reality. There is one chair for visitors that is positioned in a way that makes it slightly difficult to sit in comfortably, which you recognize immediately as intentional. Not maliciously intentional, just pragmatically intentional, because Miss Brennan does not want comfortable conversations. She wants efficient ones. You sit. Miss Brennan does not. She stands behind the desk with the rotation sheet for December, which is already drafted. You can see your name on it from where you're sitting, though you can't read the assignments. And she says without preamble, because Miss Brennan has never found preamble useful, December. What do you know about December? You tell her what Thomas told you. Loud, fast, everyone under pressure. The hierarchy compressed by urgency into something flatter, more responsive, less formal. She listens with the expression of someone checking your answer against a known answer. That's part of it, she says. What you don't know about December is this. In December, a cash girl who is good becomes visible. That's not always comfortable. Visibility at your level, in December, means you will be used in ways you haven't been used before, and you will be expected to adapt without being told to adapt. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're saying the rules change, you say. The rules don't change. She says it immediately with a precision that tells you this is important. The rules never change. What changes is the speed at which you're expected to apply them, and the margin for error narrows. She looks at you for a moment. I'm assigning you to float status for December. That means no fixed section. You'll be rotated as needed wherever the demand is highest. You'll start each morning with me for your assignment, and you may be reassigned mid-shift without notice. This is not a punishment. This is the assignment I give to the cash girls who can handle it. How many cash girls are on float status, you ask? In December? 2. A pause. Currently. You understand that currently is doing a significant amount of work in that sentence. Who's the other one? Agnes Fairfax. She returns to her desk. Try not to outperform her too obviously. She's been here longer. You're back in the corridor before you've fully processed what just happened, and you spend the next tube run trying to work out whether Miss Brennan just paid you a compliment. And you conclude that she did, but that it was a compliment in the specific dialect of Miss Brennan, which has a very small vocabulary for praise and a very large vocabulary for expectation. Agnes, when you tell her that evening, makes a face that is trying to be neutral and isn't quite succeeding. Float status, she says. Both of us. Agnes is quiet for a moment. Then, don't try to keep up with me in the first week. The first week of December, everyone burns themselves out trying to prove something, and by the second week they're running on nothing. Pace yourself the first 2 days, find your rhythm, and then you'll have something left for the week before Christmas, which is when it actually matters. How do you know I'll need the advice? Because I didn't have it my first December, and by the 23rd I was so tired I miscounted a change return by 40 cents, which cost me 25 cents in the fine and 25 cents in the guilt, because the customer never came back and I don't know if she noticed or not. Agnes picks up her tea. Also because you're clearly going to make Stock Girl in January, and I'd rather you do it without making the rest of us look incompetent by comparison. This is, you understand, the most direct statement of support you've received from anyone at Haverford since you arrived, and you receive it accordingly. Thank you, you say. Don't thank me, Agnes says. Buy me tea next time it's your turn. December 1st arrives on a Monday. The building wakes up differently on December 1st. This is not imagination or the particular suggestibility of anticipation. The building genuinely has a different energy on this morning, and it's because the building has been prepared differently. Over the weekend, while the store was closed, the display team and a crew from the stockroom spent 2 full days doing the final transformation, and when you arrive through the side entrance at 6:22 on a cold Monday morning, with your coat pulled up against the November air that has finally decided to be December air, the smell of the building hits you 3 steps inside the door. Pine. Actual pine boughs, wired to the structural columns of the main floor in arrangements that Mr. Hendricks designed to look natural and took 3 people 6 hours to execute. You can smell them from the staff corridor. The sharp, clean smell of evergreen cutting through the floor wax and the sizing, and the permanent human underlayer of a building occupied by 400 people. And underneath the pine, something warmer, cinnamon, maybe, or something in that register, coming from the confectionery counter near the main entrance that has been stocked for Christmas with items that smell as much as they look. The gilt-wrapped boxes and the paper cones of spiced nuts, and the small jars of preserved fruit in brandy that are permitted for sale, because they are a traditional gift item and not a beverage establishment, a distinction that Haverford's management has negotiated with their conscience and with the local licensing authority. You stand in the staff corridor for one moment, just one, because you have 47 seconds before your card needs to be in the time clock, and you breathe. The building smells like Christmas. Not your Christmas. Not the Christmas of Millhaven, which smelled like your mother's kitchen and wood smoke and the particular sharp cold of a house where the heating is not quite adequate, and you learn to bundle rather than complain. This is not a personal smell. It is a commercial smell, engineered and deliberate, and you know that. You know that someone decided on the pine, and someone decided on the confectionery counter's placement near the entrance, and someone calculated that the first thing a customer should smell upon entering in December should be something that activates the specific emotional register associated with generosity and warmth and the pleasure of giving. You know all of this, and the smell still works on you. This is important. You file it. The fact that a thing can be deliberate and manufactured and knowable and still produce its intended effect in you means something about the power of the store that is not diminished by understanding it. The clock. 6:24. You go. The first day of December at Haverford's department store in 1913 begins at 8:30, when the brass revolving doors swing open and the first customers of the season enter. By 8:35 the first floor is busy. By 9 o'clock it is crowded. By 10 it is full. You have been on float status since 7:15, when Miss Brennan stationed you on the first floor with the instruction to route as directed by the floor supervisor, which is Mr. Reed, who's been on the first floor since 7 because December means the floorwalker's day begins before the store opens, because there is a pre-opening period for which the only word is controlled chaos, the last preparations of the departments as the display team's overnight work is verified, any issues corrected, any missing items pulled from stock, and Mr. Reed moves through this period with the expression of a military officer at dawn, on the day of a significant engagement. Deliberate, watchful, conserving energy for what is coming. What is coming is this: a woman in her 50s carrying a list on a folded piece of paper. Behind her, 3 feet, a woman in her 30s with a smaller list and a slightly more urgent expression, because the woman behind her is her employer and she's been sent to carry packages. 3 feet behind them, a pair of young women together, not mother and daughter, friends maybe, both carrying small shopping bags from another store here to buy something specific. Then 4 people who came separately but arrived simultaneously through the revolving door and have already begun to sort themselves into the relevant aisles. Then more. The first floor fills the way a vessel fills, from the bottom up, and the bottom is the perfume and accessories area near the main entrance, where the display is most elaborate and the goods are most immediately visible, and the price points range from affordable to aspirational. By 10:30 this area is thick with women in winter coats, the coats adding a significant volume of fabric to the already compressed space, and the smell of pine and cinnamon is now in competition with the perfume counter's permanent climate, and the perfume counter is winning. You move. Float status in December is not a position. It is a state of readiness maintained in motion. You're never stationary except when a specific transaction requires it, and even then you're calculating the next move, the next route, the next need, processing the floor's state the way a chess player processes a board, not as individual pieces but as a gestalt, a relational understanding of where things are and where they're likely to go. Transaction at the glove counter, cash and receipt to the tube, return, transaction at the scarf display. No tube station here. Carry it by hand up the half flight behind the cosmetic section to the nearest tube intake on the mezzanine. Return change back to floor. Transaction at the jewellery case, which requires 2 approvals and a form because the price point triggers the additional verification procedure that Haverford's introduced last year after an incident involving a substituted receipt. And the approvals take 4 minutes, and in 4 minutes you've lost 2 other transactions to the senior cash girl whose section assignment covers jewellery. You don't lose them again. You learn. And this is learning that happens in the body before the mind, the specific kinesthetic education of December. You learn to read the floor's transactions before they're complete. The woman at the jewellery counter, hand already in purse, 60 seconds from payment. The group at the scarf display, 2 of them pulling out the same style in different colours. Simultaneous transaction, 2 receipts, 1 tube run if you time it right. The woman at accessories who has been deliberating for 3 minutes, 2 minutes more, or she'll walk away and you won't need to be there at all, so hold off, cover the glove counter transaction, come back. This is not a skill you were taught. This is the floor teaching you, through the accumulation of its own patterns, its own rhythms, the specific logic of consumer behavior when applied at scale and at speed. You are learning what humans do when they buy things, and you're learning it not as sociology but as logistics. And the 2 kinds of knowledge turn out to be the same knowledge expressed in different vocabularies. Agnes is on the floor too, covering the opposite side from you, and occasionally you see each other in passing. The 2 float girls weaving through the customer traffic like needles through fabric, and Agnes's face when you pass is neutral and professional and entirely focused, and so is yours. But you share one glance around 11 o'clock near the central display that contains the entirety of the professional communication. You're doing well, the floor is manageable, December is being survived, without a single word. The lunch break is 15 minutes, not 30, not the 20 you get on a regular day. 15! And Miss Brennan tells you this at noon when she intercepts you near the back corridor with a sandwich wrapped in paper that she hands over without comment. Because in December, Miss Brennan has a sandwich waiting for the float girls, because she has learned that the float girls won't eat otherwise. And an unfed cash girl in December is a liability. You eat the sandwich in the staff corridor, standing up. Of course. The afternoon brings something new. Around 2 o'clock, when the first wave of customers has made their purchases and departed, and the floor is at its brief mid-afternoon lull. Not empty, not quiet, just slightly less dense, slightly less urgent. A man you've not seen before appears on the first floor. He comes through the staff corridor entrance, not the main doors, which tells you he is not a customer. He is perhaps 55, dressed in a dark suit of a quality that is visible from 8 feet away. The kind of suit that doesn't call attention to itself because it doesn't need to. He is accompanied by a younger man carrying a leather notebook and a woman, perhaps 40, who walks with the authority of someone who does not wait for directions. You know who they are without knowing who they are because the floor knows. The selling staff behind the counters stand slightly differently when these 3 people step onto the selling floor. The improvement in posture is subtle, universal and immediate, like a wave passing through the department, triggered by some signal you didn't observe but which every person on the floor received simultaneously. This is Mr. Whitmore. The general floor superintendent of Haverford's department store is not a man who walks on selling floors as a matter of routine. In a normal month, he exists primarily as a concept, a name on green paper notes, a decision made somewhere above the level of visibility, a signature at the bottom of a policy memo that appears in your department head's hands and filters downward in the form of a change in procedure that you're told about by Miss Brennan, in the form of a new instruction that has no explanation attached because explanations travel upward, not downward. In December, he walks the floors. Mr. Whitmore moves through the first floor slowly, the younger man keeping pace with the notebook. The woman, who you later learn is his personal secretary, and also, Agnes tells you, has been at Haverford's longer than Mr. Whitmore himself, which tells you something about the actual architecture of power in the building, making notes of her own from a card she produces from her coat pocket. He stops at the jewellery counter. He examines the display with the specific kind of attention that powerful people bring to things they care about. Not the customer's attention, which is the attention of wanting, but the owner's attention, the attention of someone who is responsible for the thing they're looking at and is assessing whether it's performing its function. He says something to the woman. She makes a note. He moves to the accessory counter. The counter card for a particular scarf display is angled at precisely 30 degrees. He doesn't touch it. He looks at it. Then he moves on. You're at the tube station near the scarf display when he passes. You're aware of him approaching from the corner of your eye. You've been aware of him from the moment he entered. You have been aware of him the way you're aware of anything that changes the room's atmospheric pressure. And you make a decision in about half a second. You don't look up from the tube station. You complete the transaction you're in the middle of with exactly the same speed and care you'd bring to any transaction on any day. You log the receipt, you route the cylinder, and when Mr. Whitmore passes you at a distance of perhaps 3 feet, you're simply doing your job. He doesn't stop. He moves to the next counter. But a moment later, as he's speaking to the woman with the card, you see him glance back at the tube station. Just once, then away. You don't know what it means. You might know later. In the meantime, there are 4 more transactions waiting, and the afternoon rush is beginning to rebuild, and the floor does not care who just walk through it. Mr. Whitmore spends 40 minutes on the first floor. He spends time in every section, speaks to Mr. Reed for about 3 minutes in a conversation that Mr. Reed receives with the controlled stillness of a person under inspection, and then he moves toward the central staircase. He will do the second floor next, then the third, then continue upward. He will cover all 7 floors today, or he will come back tomorrow for the ones he doesn't reach. This is the December routine, Agnes told you. He walks every floor every week for the entire month. He does not walk them as a tour, he walks them as an audit. The floors are judged by how they look and how they perform when he's on them. This is the official measure. But the more important measure, the one everyone in the building understands but which is never stated explicitly, is how they perform when he's not on them. The secret audit is always the important one. What happens when the superintendent is on another floor? How the system operates when the system believes it isn't being observed. The floorwalker is his instrument. Mr. Reed is on the first floor when Mr. Whitmore is on the first floor, yes, but he is also on the first floor every other day when Mr. Whitmore is nowhere visible, and his daily reports go upward through the chain in a form that is legible to the people above and represents the store's actual performance in all the hours between audits. You understand this now in a way you didn't understand in October. You understand that you exist within a system of observation that has no blind spots that the system itself doesn't know about. That every error is recorded somewhere and every correction too. That your 30-minute tube malfunction was in Mr. Reed's report and Miss Brennan's log, and probably in the monthly summary that goes to the department level. That your recovery of the malfunction is in the same report. That the whole thing, error and recovery together, constitutes a data point in someone's understanding of who you are and what you're worth. This is not frightening exactly. Or it is frightening in the way that any high-stakes environment is frightening once you understand what's actually at stake. But it is also clarifying. The system is consistent. It responds to what you actually do, not to what you intend or what you feel or what you could have done under better circumstances. It is demanding, and it is exacting, and it has no sentiment whatsoever. And there is, underneath all of that, something almost restful about a system so completely unambiguous. You know what the rules are. You know what following them looks like. You know that following them, reliably and at speed and with the particular additional quality of solving problems before they become problems, produces specific outcomes that you can see in front of you in the form of Agnes and Mrs. Aldridge and Miss Brennan herself, each of whom is a possible version of the future you're navigating toward. Which one you become depends on choices you haven't made yet, choices you don't even know you'll need to make, but you are beginning to be able to see the shape of them. The second week of December, you meet the buyers. The buyers at Haverford's are a category of human being that you have heard about but not previously encountered, because the buyers do not work on the selling floor. They work on the 6th floor, the upper 6th floor, the part that is not the dormitory, the part behind the locked door at the end of the corridor that you have walked past every single day without registering what it contains. The buyers occupy a suite of offices and conference rooms in a large flat room with broad tables and very good light where they assess merchandise samples, and they move through the building, when they move through it at all, with a particular energy of people who are not quite of the building, but are simultaneously essential to its function. The way a composer is not a musician, but cannot be separated from the music. You meet them because in the second week of December, the buying office sends a representative to each department to review the December stock performance so far, and the representative for the first floor is a woman named Miss Harmon. Miss Harmon is 38 years old, and has the kind of appearance that is entirely composed, not beautiful in the conventional sense, but put together with such precision that beauty seems beside the point. She wears a dark blue suit that is not the Haverford's uniform and never will be, because the buyers are not subject to the uniform requirement. They are subject to a different set of expectations that relate to their own appearance as a representation of the store's taste, and Miss Harmon's suit represents the store's taste well. She carries a leather folio and a pencil, and she moves through the first floor with the particular gaze of someone who designed something and is now evaluating how it was built. Because she did. The assortment on the first floor, the specific goods, the price points, the quantities, the seasonal additions, is the product of decisions Miss Harmon made in July, sitting in a room with manufacturers' representatives and looking at samples and running numbers and making judgments about what women in this city will want to buy in December. Those judgments are now physical objects on the selling floor, and she's looking at them with the focused, unsentimental attention of someone checking their own work. You're at the tube station when she stops to look at the scarf display. She examines the display card, the arrangement. She picks up one of the scarves, not the way a customer does, with the wanting energy of desire, but the way a craftsperson picks up a finished object, rotating it slowly, reading the construction. She replaces it at exactly the angle she found it. She turns to Mr. Reed, who has materialized beside her. The lavender is outselling the green by approximately 3-1, she says. It is not a question. Mr. Reed confirms it. Reduce the green facing by half. Use the space for the cream and the gold. She makes a note in the folio. The price on the embroidered set needs to come down 4 cents. The customer's calculating against the plain set and the math isn't working. Mr. Reed makes his own note. Miss Harmon moves to the jewellery counter. You watch her go, and you are aware that what you just observed was the buyer correcting the selling floor in real time, based on information that exists nowhere in any written report but only in the transactional data of the past 11 days, which she apparently carries in her head in a form specific enough to know that lavender is outselling green 3-1. This is the buyer. This is what the buyers do. Not just choosing the merchandise, choosing it and then tracking it, and then correcting in response to what the floor tells them, in a continuous loop of decision and observation that runs from July to January and produces at the end of each year the lesson for the following year. You spend the rest of the afternoon thinking about this, not in a way that interrupts the transactions or the tube runs or the floor navigation. The thinking happens in parallel, in the part of your mind that is not occupied with the immediate logistics, the same way you can walk a familiar route without thinking about walking it. You think about what it means to know the lavender to green ratio without consulting a report, about what kind of accumulated knowledge that represents, about whether that knowledge is the kind that can be learned deliberately or only the kind that develops through the specific combination of responsibility and time, and about what the step is between cash girl and stock girl, and between stock girl and sales floor, and between sales floor and something that might, eventually, with time and with the specific kind of attention you're already practicing, begin to approach something like what Miss Harmon carries in her folio. The third week of December is the week the building becomes something else entirely. The tempo has been increasing all month, incrementally, each day slightly faster than the last, the way a piece of music accelerates toward its climax, not in sudden jumps, but in gradual compression. By the third week, the floor runs at a speed that would have seemed impossible to you in October. The transactions are faster because the customers are more decisive. There is less browsing now, less deliberating. People know what they want, or they've been told what to get and they're getting it and leaving. The gift list in one hand and the package in the other. And the cash flow is correspondingly faster, and your routes between stations have become so optimized that you could run them in your sleep, which is close to what you're doing. Your feet have stopped hurting in the way they hurt in October. This is not because the pain went away. It is because the pain crossed a threshold and became background noise, a permanent condition rather than an acute one, and your body adapted to it the way it adapts to all permanent conditions, by building up around it, by learning to function in its presence. The callus on your right heel is now substantial. The thickening along the ball of your left foot is something you can feel through your shoe, but no longer wince at. You have the feet of someone who stands on hard floors all day, which is what you are, and they are not the feet you came here with. This is the kind of change you can observe in yourself most clearly only when you look at a photograph or remember a specific detail from before. You remember, with peculiar vividness, the morning in October when you first stood on the marble floor of the second floor and felt the cold of it through your shoes, the specific temperature of that cold, precise and unforgiving, like standing on something that is not interested in your comfort. You don't feel that cold anymore. Either the floor warmed up, or you changed enough that the difference between you and the floor has become negotiable. Both, probably. December the 18th is a Wednesday and is the single busiest day of the shopping season. You don't know this in advance. You know it only in retrospect. When Mr. Reed tells Mr. Whitmore at the end of the day, you hear this in passing through the back corridor, not eavesdropping, just present, that the register totals for the day represent the highest single-day figure in the store's December history, which Mr. Reed delivers with the tone of a man reporting a military victory from a battle that cost everyone involved something significant. What you know on the morning of December the 18th is that it is Wednesday, that your float assignment puts you on the second floor for the first part of the morning before rotation to the first floor at 10, and that Agnes met you in the kitchen at 5:55 with the expression of someone reading weather. "Today," she said. That was all she said, but you understood. The second floor at 7:30 has the atmosphere of the hours before a storm. The selling staff are moving through the final preparations with a focused speed that belongs to people who have done this before and know what's coming. Mrs. Aldridge is at her counter at 7:20, running her cloth along the edge of the case. But the cloth is moving faster than usual, the motion more compressed. The 8:12 ritual truncated by the simple mathematics of a day that is going to require everything from everyone before it ends. You watch her for a moment. She looks up. Not the reflexive awareness of the room look. She looks directly at you. The first time she's made direct eye contact with you since October. "Are you on float today?" she asks. "Yes, ma'am." "When they send you to the first floor, don't take the central staircase. The customer traffic blocks it after 9:30. Take the east stairs, 2 minutes faster." She goes back to the cloth. You stand there for 1 second, receiving this piece of information, understanding what it represents in the specific currency of this building. Mrs. Aldridge does not give advice, not to cash girls, not unsolicited, not without some particular reason. The east stairs are 2 minutes faster, and she knows it, and she's telling you, and the telling of it is a gesture that costs her something. The acknowledgement of your presence, the investment of attention in someone whose level does not typically warrant it, and she's made it anyway. You go to the east stairs for the rest of December. The doors open at 8:30. By 8:40 the second floor is busy. By 9:15 it is full. You are moving between stations so continuously that the floor becomes less a place and more a sequence of waypoints, a route rather than a location, and the transactions you're processing are almost automatic now. The tube station load, send, wait, receive deliver rhythms so deeply internalized that it's happening below the level of thought, leaving the upper levels of your attention free to track the floor in the broader sense, the gestalt reading that tells you where the next pressure point is before it becomes a crisis. There is, at 10:17, a moment of complete clarity. You're between stations, in the specific geography of the selling floor, in the aisle between the fabric counter and the notions, midway between the tube station at the east end and the tube station at the west. For approximately 4 seconds, you're in transit and not yet needed anywhere, and the floor is doing what it does and you're moving through it. You stop. Not actually. You don't actually stop, because stopping in the aisles during December at a busy time of day is a thing that Mr. Reed would notice, and which would appear in a report. But internally, you stop. For 4 seconds, you are precisely present in the selling floor of Haverford's department store on December the 18th, 1913, and you see it whole. The women at the counters, the bolts of fabric being pulled and measured and cut, the notions drawers open and shut, the tube stations sending and receiving in their steady pneumatic rhythm, the sound of it everywhere now, almost constant, the background sound of December commerce at full operation. Mrs. Aldridge behind her counter, explaining something to a woman about the weight of a wool crepe, and the explanation is precise and the customer is listening and the sale will happen. You can see it in the geometry of their exchange. The replacement salesgirl, who is not a replacement anymore, who has been here long enough to have learned the counter and who is handling a separate transaction with the competent speed of someone who knows their work. The light through the east windows, which faces a narrow street and so gets only the indirect light of the December day, which by mid-morning is a cold, clear light that comes through the window at an angle that catches the glass in the display cases and produces a brief illumination of everything inside them, so that for an hour in the middle of the morning, the fabric counter looks like it's lit from within. And you, moving through it, part of it, a thread in the fabric of the thing, and you are 17 years old and you have been here for 11 weeks, and in those 11 weeks this place has done something to you that Millhaven had 14 years to do and didn't quite manage, or manage differently, and you are not the same person who arrived through the side entrance with a cardboard suitcase. 4 seconds, then you move. The day continues. At noon, something goes wrong. The problem begins, as problems in large systems often do, not with a failure but with a coincidence. 2 failures happening simultaneously in adjacent parts of the system, each one manageable on its own, but together producing a consequence that is not manageable without intervention. The first failure is a tube jam on the second floor, the longest section of the pneumatic system, running from the fabric counter to the counting office on the 5th floor, which jams at 12:03. The maintenance log later records the cause as a deformed cylinder. One of the brass carriers has taken a knock somewhere in its recent circuit and has a small dent that doesn't affect its load capacity, but does affect the fit of the tube, and at a junction on the 3rd floor where the pipe narrows by a fraction, the deformed cylinder sticks. The second failure is a cash shortage at the 1st floor jewellery counter. Not theft. Investigation will later establish that the morning's unusually high transaction volume, combined with the vacation of the senior cashier on that section and her less experienced replacement, produced a running error in the change calculations that accumulated into a $16 discrepancy by noon. $16 in 1913 is enough money that the error triggers the procedure. The procedure requires that the counter be closed, its contents counted, the discrepancy identified and resolved, and the counter not reopened until the count is clean. The counter cannot be closed without a floor supervisor's authorization. The floor supervisor for the first floor is Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed is currently on the mezzanine dealing with a separate customer situation involving a returned item and a disputed receipt. Both things happen at once. The tube is down. The jewellery counter is closed. The counting office on the 5th floor does not yet know the tube is down, which means it is waiting for a cylinder that isn't coming, and the wait will eventually trigger a query, and the query will require a human explanation, and the human who provides that explanation is whoever Miss Brennan identifies as available. Miss Brennan identifies you. She finds you at the 2nd floor tube station, waiting for the return on a routed cylinder that isn't coming back because the tube above you is jammed, which you have already identified as a problem and for which you are already constructing the solutions by hand up the back stairs, the same as October, when Miss Brennan appears at your elbow. She tells you the situation in 40 words. Tube down, jewellery count open, Reed unavailable, counting office waiting. I need you to cover the tube failure manually, and I need you to take a message to the counting office about the jewellery delay. Can you do both without dropping anything? There is, in Miss Brennan's vocabulary, exactly one correct answer to this question. Yes, you say. What follows is 45 minutes that you will remember with a specific kinetic clarity for the rest of your working life. Not because they were dramatic. Nothing in them is dramatic in the way that the word suggests. There is no single moment of crisis or resolution. No visible confrontation or definitive turning point. But because they require you to operate simultaneously at 2 speeds, to be both the human infrastructure for the tube failure and the human communication channel for the jewellery situation, and to do both without either one degrading the other. The tube failure on the 2nd floor means that every transaction requiring cash routing from the fabric and notions sections has to be walked. There are, on a Wednesday morning at peak December trading, approximately 12 to 15 such transactions per hour. You're one person. The counting office is on the 5th floor. The back stairs are the east stairs. You run the math while you're moving. 12 transactions in 45 minutes is 1 every 3 3/4 minutes. Up the stairs through the counting office intake, back down. 2.5 minutes at speed, not running, controlled urgency walking, the specific pace that covers ground at near running speed without technically violating the no running rule. That leaves 1 minute 15 per transaction for the tube station itself. Tight. Very tight. But workable if the transactions are consistent, which they won't be. Because nothing in a busy December selling floor is consistent, so you're actually managing against an average that will include several surges. The message for the counting office you deliver on your first trip up, efficiently, verbally to the intake clerk who records it in the log with the particular composed neutrality of someone who has worked in the counting office long enough to have processed many kinds of bad news. Jewelry counter is down for count, estimated resolution 1 hour. He writes it. You go, back down, transaction, up, down, transaction, up. The first 3 trips are cleanly executed. The 4th one is the hardest. A transaction that requires 2 receipts and a change calculation that the replacement salesgirl has done incorrectly, and correcting it without making the salesgirl feel corrected in a way that would affect her performance for the rest of the day, which is itself a calculation, requires 30 seconds you didn't budget. You adjust the next 3 trips to recover the time by taking a shorter route through the storage area on the 3rd floor that saves 4 seconds per pass, which you know about because Thomas showed it to you one afternoon in November when the regular route was blocked by a stock cart. 32 minutes in, the tube clears. The maintenance team sends a confirmation slip down through the working section of the tube, a green slip that arrives at the 2nd floor intake while you're at the top of these stairs, and by the time you've come back down it's already been received by the salesgirl at the tube station who is waving it at you with the expression of someone delivering good news. You complete the current transaction by hand anyway, already in motion, already carrying the receipts. No point changing course mid-stride. Then the tube takes over and you can step back from the stairs and feel the exact texture of your legs, which have climbed those stairs 11 times in 32 minutes and are communicating with you clearly and at length about the experience. You breathe. Mr. Reed appears at the tube station 10 minutes later. He has resolved the mezzanine situation. He looks at you, at the tube station, at the log sheet where the manual transactions have been recorded in your handwriting. 12 entries, he says. 11, you say. The 12th went through the tube. I completed it by hand because I was already in motion. He reads the log. He checks the times. You ran this solo. Yes, sir, Miss Brennan authorised. He closes the log. He looks at you the way he looked at you in October when you first covered Daisy Chen Station, the cataloguing look. But something in it is different now. The file he's building has more information in it than it did in October, and the information has changed its organisation. He says nothing else. He moves on. But the next morning your assignment slip from Miss Brennan has a different code on it. The section code. Not the float designation. An actual section assignment. Section B, 2nd floor, Mrs. Aldridge's section. You stare at the slip for a moment, standing in the corridor outside Miss Brennan's office, and then you fold it and put it in your pocket and go to the stairs. The day before Christmas Eve is the day the department store reveals what it was built for. Everything until now has been preparation. The window displays and the pine boughs and the buyer's adjustments and the December hiring of additional staff and the extra shift for the stockroom and the extended hours and the Saturday crowd and the Wednesday crowd and the long, slow accumulation of pressure over 23 days. All of it was preparation. This is the day. You arrive at 5:45, 15 minutes before the bell because you couldn't sleep from 5:20 onward and the dormitory ceiling offers nothing useful, and you sit in the kitchen with your second cup of tea and you listen to the building. At 5:40 it is quiet in the way that only precedes noise. The tubes are silent. The cleaning staff finished an hour ago. The display team left at 3 in the morning. The stock rooms are loaded and waiting. The counters are dressed. The price tags are at their 30-degree angles. The pine boughs are still releasing their scent into the air, fainter now, 3 weeks into December. The sharpness of new pine fading into something softer, almost warm. You sit with your tea, and you listen to the quiet, and you understand, in the way you sometimes understand things before you know how to say them, that this building has been designed for exactly this moment. Not for the quiet, for what the quiet is about to become. For the 12 hours between 8:30 and 8:30 when the city brings its December need to Haverford's department store, and the store receives it. Agnes comes in at 5:55. She pours tea. She sits across from you. "Ready?" she says. "Yes." She nods. She drinks her tea. At 8:25, 5 minutes before the doors open, you are at your station on Section B of the second floor. The selling staff are in position. Mrs. Aldridge is behind her counter. The replacement salesgirl, who has been on this section through the whole of December and is no longer a replacement in any meaningful sense, is to her right. The notions girl, whose name is Ruth, and who has the specific nimble-fingered quality of someone who has spent 3 years handling small objects at speed, is at the notions counter. You are at the tube station. The tube station on Section B is one of the 2 oldest in the building, original to the 1891 installation, and it has a slightly different sound from the newer ones. The intake has a particular mechanical clunk that the newer versions don't. Something in the valve mechanism, a small individual voice in the otherwise uniform choir of the building's pneumatic system. You've been listening to this tube station for 2 weeks on your Section B assignment, and you know this sound. You know what a clean intake sounds like, and you know what a slightly off intake sounds like, and you know the difference between the two in the same way. You know the difference between good steps and a step about to give, which is the kind of knowledge that lives in the body rather than the mind. The tube is clear. 8:30. The doors open. And the day begins in the way that the day before Christmas Eve begins in a department store in 1913, which is the way a river begins when a dam opens. Not gradually, not incrementally, but all at once. The full force of everything that has been building and waiting simply arriving. By 8:45, Section B has 6 customers at the counter. By 9:12, Mrs. Aldridge is moving with a precision you have been watching for 2 weeks and have not yet fully absorbed. The way she manages 2 simultaneous consultations by dividing her attention with such apparent ease that each customer believes they have it entirely. The way she knows without looking which bolt to reach for. The way she reads the transaction before the customer has finished describing what they want and is already positioning herself for the sale. You are moving. Transaction. Tube. Return. Transaction. Hand carry for the counter near the east window that isn't tube served. Up the mezzanine. Return. Back. Transaction. 2 receipts. Tube. Wait. Return. The rhythm is faster than any day you've worked. Not because the transactions are individually faster. Many of them are actually slower, because the customers today are buying in quantity, purchasing fabric for multiple projects, buying sets of notions to go with the fabric, adding the trim and the buttons and the lining material while they're at it. The complete purchase rather than the single item, because Christmas concentrates buying energy the way a lens concentrates light. But because the transactions are continuous, no gap between them, one completing as the next begins, so that the overall throughput is higher even when each individual transaction is longer. You adapt. You have learned in 11 weeks of this building and 3 weeks of December to adapt in real time, to take the information of the moment and recalculate without pausing. The tube line has a queue, 3 cylinders ahead of yours. Reroute to the east mezzanine intake instead. Add 40 seconds to the trip, but bypass the queue. Net gain of 30 seconds. Customer at the east window counter is approaching payment. Position yourself there before she reaches the register so the wait is 0. The Section B tube gives its slightly off clunk. Check the cylinder orientation before sending. 2 seconds lost now saves the 4-minute jam later. At 11 o'clock, a woman at Mrs. Aldridge's counter asks for a fabric that is not on the floor. This is the moment you've been peripheral to for 2 weeks, the one Mrs. Aldridge fields occasionally, the request for a bolt that exists in the store's inventory, but has not been brought to the selling floor, either because it's sold out of the floor stock or because it was never stocked at this counter but is in the warehouse. The procedure for this request goes through the stockroom via a written order, which in normal times is delivered by the floor's own counter runner. But in December, the counter runner system has been replaced by the float cash girl system, which means the order form goes through you. Mrs. Aldridge turns to you without interrupting her sentence to the customer. She places the order form on the tube station counter beside you. She returns to the customer. You look at the form. Stockroom request, second floor fabric, item number, quantity. It goes to the stockroom intake, not the counting office. Different tube address. You route it. You wait. Because stockroom returns take longer than counting office returns. The stockroom has to locate the item, prepare it, confirm availability, and route back, which under normal circumstances takes 15 minutes, and in December takes as long as it takes. And while you wait, you continue the transaction flow for the rest of the counter, and when the stockroom response comes back 12 minutes later, confirming the item is available and will be brought to the floor within the hour, you take the confirmation to Mrs. Aldridge in the 4-second gap between her current transaction ending and the next customer beginning. She reads it. She turns to the waiting customer, who has not been waiting exactly. She has been examining the other bolts while Mrs. Aldridge demonstrated them, a patient and wealthy woman with the particular calm of someone for whom waiting is a choice rather than a compulsion, and relays the information. The customer nods. She will wait. She's buying 4 other items in the meantime. At 1 o'clock, the floor lunch break comes and goes in 15 minutes again, and you eat a sandwich in the back corridor, and your legs are tired in the specific way they get tired now. Not the acute pain of the first weeks, but the deep fatigue of muscles that have been working for 6 hours and are prepared to work for 6 more and are simply noting, for the record, that they are aware of this. The afternoon accelerates. By 3 o'clock, the floor has a quality of intensity that you've never felt before, not in all of December, not on the Saturday crowds or the Wednesday rush. The 3 o'clock crowd on December the 23rd is a specific phenomenon. People who've been putting off their final purchases until the last possible moment, who are buying with the particular urgency of someone running out of time, which produces transactions that are faster in some ways and more complicated in others, because decisiveness and urgency don't always travel together. And a customer who is in a hurry can be harder to serve than a customer who has all day. Mrs. Aldridge is extraordinary. You've watched her every day for 2 weeks, and she has been excellent every day for 2 weeks. But today she is something beyond excellent. She is operating in a register that is beyond anything you have observed in this building. She's managing 4 simultaneous conversations, 2 at the counter, 1 with Ruth about a notions restock, 1 with you, 3 words, stockroom order follow-up, and moving between them with the serenity of someone for whom this pace is simply the correct pace. The tempo she was built for, her whole 22 years in this building having been preparation for exactly this. And she's kind. This is the thing you were not expecting. Not kind in a soft way, not indulgent or excessive, but the customers who come to her counter today are some of them frantic. The woman who needs fabric for her daughter's Christmas dress and didn't realize until last night that she didn't have enough. The woman who lost the original receipt and needs to exchange an item purchased by her husband 3 weeks ago. The woman who wants something very specific and is getting increasingly distressed at her inability to articulate what that something is. And Mrs. Aldridge handles all of them with a patience that is not performed, with a specific attentiveness that makes each person feel, at least for the duration of the transaction, that they are the only person in the room. You have watched her do this for 2 weeks, and you have not understood where it comes from. You understand that this selling floor requires it as a technical skill, but technical skills can be performed without feeling like anything, and what Mrs. Aldridge does when she looks at a customer and hears their need and responds to it is not entirely technical. It is something that she has developed over 22 years, perhaps. The accumulated understanding that the people on the other side of the counter are in fact people. That the woman with the Christmas dress problem is not a transaction but a person with a problem, and that this distinction, maintained consistently and without sentimentality, is what separates a good salesperson from a great one. You file this away too. You've been filing things away for 11 weeks. The file is enormous now. You carry it with you everywhere, this accumulated archive of observed knowledge, and you know that you will spend years unpacking it, understanding things now that you didn't understand you were learning when you learned them, the way you understand later, reading a letter that you learned something from the person who wrote it that you didn't know they were teaching you. At 4:30, Mr. Whitmore appears on the second floor. He comes from the east staircase. You see him first because you are near the east staircase, returning from a mezzanine tube run, and he enters the selling floor 4 feet in front of you, the notebook man behind him, the secretary to his right. He looks at the floor. He looks at the fabric counter, where Mrs. Aldridge is completing a transaction with a focused efficiency that is doing exactly what it should be doing. He looks at the notions counter, where Ruth is moving between 3 customers with the specific, quick-handed competence of someone who's been doing this for 3 years. He looks at the aisle, at the traffic flow, which is high but not chaotic, the customers navigating the space with the slight friction of any busy day, but without the bottlenecks that indicate a system under stress. His gaze crosses the tube station. It crosses you. He keeps moving. At the center of the floor, near the main display case, he stops. He speaks quietly to the secretary. She makes a note. He speaks to the notebook man. The notebook man makes a different note. He moves toward Mrs. Aldridge's counter. Mrs. Aldridge sees him coming. She finishes the sentence she's in the middle of, completes the transaction with the seamlessness of someone who has never been interrupted in the middle of anything in her life, and turns to face him. "Mrs. Aldridge," he says, "Mr. Whitmore." She does not incline her head. She meets his gaze directly. This is the only time you have observed anyone on the selling floor do this. Your section is performing well. He says it the way he might say a door is properly hung, accurate and accessible. "My section has good staff," she says. He looks at her for a moment. Something passes between them that has the texture of a long familiarity and the surface of a professional exchange, and you can read approximately half of it, and the rest is encoded in 22 years of shared institutional history that you don't have. His gaze moves from her to the tube station. To you. You are in position. You're doing your job. You're looking at the tube station with exactly the appropriate attention of a cash girl on a busy afternoon in December. "Marsh," he says. You look up. "December performance," he says. "Section B assignment as of the 8th. You do not know if this is a question or a statement. You treat it as a statement. "Yes, sir." He looks at you for 3 seconds. Then, "The counting office noted the tube malfunction cover on the 18th. "Yes, sir." 11 runs in 32 minutes. "Yes, sir." He says nothing else to you. He turns back to Mrs. Aldridge. They exchange 2 more sentences about the stock request system that you only partially hear because you have returned your attention to the tube station with appropriate professional focus. Then he moves on, continuing his circuit of the second floor. You stand at the tube station and you breathe through your nose and you feel the specific weight of having been seen by the person at the top of the visible hierarchy of this building, and you feel something that you decide carefully not to assign a name to yet, because naming it would require you to know what it means, and you don't know that yet. What you know is this. The counting office noted the tube malfunction cover. 11 runs in 32 minutes. The counting office keeps records of everything. That is its function. That is the entire function of the 5th floor. And those records flow upward, and what flows upward reaches the general floor superintendent. And the general floor superintendent has your name attached to a specific event that occurred on December the 18th, and he said your name. In this building, being named by Mr. Whitmore is a form of currency. You turn back to the transactions. There are 5 waiting, and the afternoon isn't finished, and the day before Christmas Eve doesn't care about anything you're thinking. At 6 o'clock, the floor begins its final wind down. The customers thinning, the last of the day's commerce completing itself with the particular exhaustion of the thing nearly done. Transactions that should have been straightforward taking slightly longer, because everyone involved has been at full capacity for 8 hours, and the margins of precision have narrowed. The closing routine takes 45 minutes. Every bolt returned to its position, every drawer closed, every price tag at its angle, every surface wiped. The count completed, and the receipts bundled and the totals verified against the tube records and the discrepancies. There are always small discrepancies, rounding errors, minor miscalculations, noted and explained. Mrs. Aldridge closes her section at 6:43, 3 minutes ahead of the standard. She turns to you as you're finishing the tube station log. "Well done today," she says. 2 words. In Mrs. Aldridge's vocabulary, this is the equivalent of a speech. You thank her. You finish the log. You go to the east stairs. 6 flights up instead of 4 tonight. The dormitory's on the 6th floor, but you go up to the roof access first, a door you found 3 weeks ago that is technically not locked, and technically not supposed to be opened by staff, and which you have opened exactly twice before, both times alone, and which you open now and step through. The roof of Haverford's department store is tar paper and piping, and the housing for the pneumatic system's pressure mechanics, a large grey box that makes a faint continuous sound, and beyond it the low parapet wall in the city. December the 23rd, 8:30 in the evening, cold, properly cold, the breath visible, the air sharp with a particular quality of city cold that has nothing to do with countryside cold. This cold is industrial and electrical. It smells like the building below and the street below that, and the 100 buildings in every direction, all of them releasing their heat upward and their coal smoke upward and their accumulated human warmth upward into an air that takes it all and turns it into this specific cold that is the temperature of everything above the city. You stand at the parapet. The city spreads outward from the building's edge. The street directly below, the main street with its street lamps making pools of yellow-white light in the December dark, and within those pools the last of the day's foot traffic. People walking with their purchases, with their packages wrapped in Haverford's brown paper and tied with Haverford's green ribbon, carrying them home. You can see the ribbon from up here, the small flashes of green when a street lamp catches it, moving in every direction outward from the store's main entrance. Further out, the city's geometry is visible in a way it never is from the street. The grid of blocks, the varying heights of buildings, the dark channels of the avenues between them, And in those channels, the lights of the trolley cars and the motor cars and the occasional horse-drawn vehicle that has not yet adapted to the fact that the city is changing, moving steadily towards something the streetscape doesn't quite contain yet, and beyond all of it, in every direction, the city continuing past the point where your eyes can resolve the individual lights into individual things, becoming a general luminescence, a collective human brightness that is in 1913 much smaller than it will become. The electrical grid still young, the street lamp still in the process of replacing gas, and the houses beyond a certain distance still dark in the old way, dark in the way that cities were dark for 100,000 years before someone figured out how to run electricity through wires, but still bright, still more light than you've ever seen from a high place in Millhaven, where the darkness was absolute and the stars were accordingly spectacular. And here the stars are largely invisible behind the light rising from below. But below is this human brightness, this evidence of 1 million people living simultaneously. You think about the day. You think about Mrs. Aldridge's 2 words, about Mr. Whitmore's 3 seconds, about the 11 runs in 32 minutes, which are in the counting office records and will be in the monthly summary, and will be in the document that Miss Brennan reads in January when she prepares for the wage conversations. You think about Agnes's advice about asking for 35 cents. You think about Thomas on the loading dock 2 months ago, adjusting the carton angle, the thing that costs nothing and saves something. You think about Miss Harmon with her leather folio and the lavender to green ratio, about what kind of knowledge that is and where it comes from and how long it takes to build it. You think about the stock girl position opening in January, Miss Brennan's office with the uncomfortable chair, what you will say when you sit in it. The building below you is closing itself for the night. You can feel it distantly, not the sounds exactly, but a shift in the building's presence beneath your feet, the vibration of the cleaning machines beginning their rounds, the slight lessening of the pressure sound of the pneumatic system as the counting office finalizes its last processes. The building is counting itself up, tallying itself, confirming what it was today, and setting itself up to be what it will be tomorrow. Christmas Eve tomorrow, Christmas Day the day after, when the store is closed and the city is briefly a different version of itself, quieter and more private. The commerce paused for 24 hours in the observance of the thing that commerce has organized itself around, but which is still at its center, a day that belongs to families and to homes and to a kind of warmth that no building of this size and complexity can manufacture, regardless of how carefully it chooses its pine boughs and its cinnamon-adjacent fragrances. You will spend Christmas at the boarding house on Clement Street where your mother's cousin used to live before she married, which is where you stayed before moving into the Haverfords' dormitory. The cousin will have a husband there and her 2 children, and there will be food that is not institutional food, and a parlour that smells like a parlour and not like a selling floor, and you will write a letter to your mother and tell her things about the city that are accurate but not alarming, which is its own form of composition skill. And on December the 26th, Haverfords will reopen, and the post-Christmas sales will begin, and the selling floor will fill again with people returning things and exchanging things and taking advantage of the reduced prices that the January clearance produces, and you will be there. You are always going to be here. This is the thought that arrives on the roof of Haverford's department store on a cold December night with the city spread out below you and the tubes quiet beneath your feet. Not the thought you expected, not the grand thought about ambition, or the future or the version of yourself that might someday understand the lavender to green ratio without consulting a report. Just this: you are going to be here. In this building, in this system, in this particular weave of transactions and hierarchies and accumulated knowledge, and Mrs. Aldridge's cloth, and the east stairs and the tube station with its individual clunk, and the building is going to continue absorbing you, and you're going to continue learning it, and the learning is going to change you in ways you can't entirely predict or control, and this is not frightening. This is, in fact, what you came here for. Not for Haverford specifically, not for this building or this city or this particular arrangement of marble floors and pneumatic tubes, but for the thing that Haverford's represents, which is the proof that a girl from Millhaven, Ohio can come to a city with $32 sewn into her coat and stand on the roof of a building that processes $100,000 of commerce in December and say, clearly and without drama, I am part of this, not as a visitor, not as a tourist or an observer or someone passing through on the way to somewhere more appropriate, as someone who knows the floor, who knows the east stairs and the section codes, and the difference between the clean tube sound and the slightly off tube sound, and who knows that Mrs. Aldridge runs her cloth at 8.12, and that the lavender outsells the green, and that asking for 35 cents when you want 30 makes the negotiation start in the right place. Who knows that the warmth of the dormitory at the end of a long day is real warmth, earned warmth, and that it is not the warmth of the selling floor's managed temperature, but the warmth of a body that has been used and is being rested, and that these two things are completely different, and the second one is the one that matters. You stand on the roof until the cold gets into your coat in the specific way that means it's time to go. Then you turn away from the parapet and go back through the door and down the stairs, 6 flights down to the dormitory level, the hallway with its bare bulbs and its smell of many occupants and the specific sound of a building at rest. Your room, the 4 beds, Agnes already sleeping, her breathing even and slow. Clara's form under the blanket, the 2 others. You take your shoes off. The relief is the same as it always is. The specific unglazing of pressure from structures that have been supporting weight all day, the joints settling, the tendons lengthening. Your feet are not the same feet you arrived with. They are the feet of someone who works here. You put the shoes under the bed. You sit for a moment on the edge of the mattress and you flex your toes in the dark and you listen to the building. The cleaning machines on the floors below, their rhythmic back and forth. The pipes settling in the cooling night air. The steam system's contractions as the temperature falls, producing the series of small ticks and groans that you have learned to sleep through. The distant sound of the city outside, which never fully stops, which continues in its low register through every hour that the store is closed, and the floors are empty and the tubes are silent. You have a wage conversation in January. You have a stock girl position to apply for. You have 3 more weeks of December to survive, and you have, in the specific account of what you know and what you can do, and what this building has made of you in 11 weeks, considerably more than $32. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and the day after is Christmas, and the day after that the store reopens and the January clearance begins and the calendar turns, and none of it waits for you to feel ready for it, which is fine, because you learned something in October that you understand better now. Ready is not a state you arrive at. Ready is the state of having shown up enough times that the next time doesn't feel impossible. Ready is the accumulated weight of 11 weeks of east stairs and tube runs and missed lunch breaks and learning the floor by becoming part of it. You are ready. You are tired. These 2 things are not contradictions. You lie down. The mattress accepts your weight with the familiar give of a surface that has been slept on regularly enough to know you. The blanket over you, the weight of it across your chest and shoulders, the slight roughness at the edge against your chin. The pipes settle. The cleaning machines go over the 4th floor now. You can hear the slight change in frequency as they move from the 3rd to the 4th. The vibration of it so distant it's more felt than heard. A pulse in the structure of the building. Agnes breathes. Clara breathes. The 2 other girls breathe. And the building breathes around all of you. And the city breathes around the building. And on the 4th floor the cleaning machines move in their careful sweeping arcs over the marble floors that will be walked on tomorrow by thousands of people who will not think about the marble, who will walk on it the way you walk on the ground outside, without noticing, without acknowledgement, because it is simply where they are. And you know that marble. You know the dip near the central aisle on the 2nd floor and the cold of it through shoes in October, and the way it sounds different when the floor is empty. A slight resonance. The percussion of your own footsteps coming back to you from the walls. And the way it feels when there are 3,000 people on it. Which is to say you don't feel it at all, because the floor disappears under the weight of the day and becomes simply the medium in which you move. You know this building. Floor by floor, section by section, tube station by tube station, stair by stair. You know Mrs. Aldridge at 8:12 with her cloth. You know Mr. Reed and his 12 words and his floorwalker's walk that covers ground without appearing to go anywhere. You know Miss Brennan's office with the uncomfortable chair and the rotation sheets and the everything that Miss Brennan knows that she has not yet told you, but which she is demonstrating daily in the form of assignments and corrections and the single note on a slip of green paper that tells you where you will be tomorrow. You know Agnes and her 35-cent wisdom. You know Thomas and his carton angle. You know Daisy's left slot. You know the east stairs are 2 minutes faster. The building settles. The day recedes. Tomorrow it will be here. This building, this floor, these stairs, these tubes. Mrs. Aldridge with her cloth. Miss Brennan with her roster. The customers coming through the brass revolving doors with their purposes and their lists and their specific needs that it is the function of the selling floor to meet, and which you help to meet, one transaction at a time, one tube run at a time, one problem solved before it becomes a problem, one morning at a time. This is the work. Not glamorous, not simple, not the work that gets its name on the front of the building in gold letters or its portrait in the executive office. The invisible work. The work of keeping the system running, of being the nerve and the wire and the human backup for the mechanical system, of carrying information and currency through the organism of the store, and making sure that what arrives is what was sent. You are good at it. You are getting better. You are 17 years old and you came from Millhaven, and you know the east stairs, and somewhere in the counting office there is a record that reads 11 runs in 32 minutes, and Mr. Whitmore knows your name. And in January Miss Brennan's door will be open, and you will go through it, and you will sit in the uncomfortable chair, and you will say what you came here to say. But that is January. This is now. The pipe tick that marks the hour, somewhere in the building skeleton. You've learned to count them in your sleep. Your eyes are heavy with the specific weight of a day that demanded everything you had and got it. The particular pleasant ache of used muscles along your calves and through your shoulders and down the length of your arms. The warmth spreading from the centre of your body outward, from the place where the day's effort generated its heat, slow and diffuse. The warmth of work done. Let it come. Let the sounds of the building fade into the background where they belong, where they live, where they will be waiting when you wake at 5:50 to the bell. Let the counting office and the tube station and the lavender to green ratio and the angle of the price tag step back and become the furniture of tomorrow, not tonight. Let your legs rest. Let your feet have their peace. You've earned it for them. Let the dormitory hold you, and the blanket cover you, and the building breathe around you, and the city continue its quiet December night. Outside the window, you can't quite see from where you're lying, the pain of it catching the street lamp's light in a faint illumination that doesn't quite reach across the room. Somewhere below on the 4th floor, the cleaning machines finish their circuit and turn and begin again. Somewhere in the city, a trolley bell, clear and brief and gone. Somewhere in the building, the pneumatic pressure settling for the night, the tubes resting in their pipes, the brass cylinders in their storage racks waiting for tomorrow. You are warm enough. You are fed enough. You are safe enough. You have work tomorrow and you know how to do it, and the knowing is in your body and your body's at rest and the rest is real. It is the realest thing there is. This specific heaviness of a person who has given the day what it asked for and is now taking back what belongs to the night. Sleep is not far. It is the close particular dark behind your eyelids. It is the slowing of the breath, long and slow, long and slow, longer and slower, the spaces between breaths widening into something you stop measuring. The building holds you, the night holds the building, and somewhere in the building a girl from Millhaven, Ohio is learning to become someone she doesn't have a name for yet. Someone made of marble floors and east stairs, and the sound of pneumatic tubes and Mrs. Aldridge's cloth, and $32 sewn into a coat that she doesn't need anymore. Not because the money is spent, but because the money has become something else, has become knowledge and presence, and the particular competence of a person who knows the floor. The floor. The floor is still there, 6 stories below, dressed and waiting, price tags at 30 degrees, pine boughs releasing the last of their December scent into the empty air. Tomorrow it will carry thousands of people. Tonight it carries only your knowledge of it, stored in the body of a girl who's asleep in the building that has, by now in every way that matters, become hers. The city breathes. The building breathes. You breathe. Long and slow. Long and slow. And then not even that. Just rest. Just the long, dark drift of a mind that has earned its silence. Past the counters and the tube stations and the price tags and the east stairs and the 32 minutes 11 runs and the cloth at 8:12. Past all of it. Past everything the day was made of, into the quiet place where there are no floors to know and no transactions to run and no hierarchies to navigate. Just this. Just the warmth, just the dark, just the building around you, breathing. Good night.